Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1091 of the War News stream. And tonight we have very big news that Russian forces are getting pushed back on all fronts. Ukraine and Russia are also exchanging massive drone strikes, and also Turkey, of all countries, has now entered negotiations with Ukraine. And it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 48 hours of news from around the world, but particularly today from the war in Ukraine, as major battlefield developments have been occurring over the past 48 hours, showing that Ukrainian forces have now achieved the offensive initiative on all fronts at this point, and it appears that the Russian Federation has now been put on the defensive in every single major battlefield zone, including Kursk, Pokrovsk, Toretsk, and many other battlefields that have been of little note up to this point, but it does appear that the Ukrainians are actually wiping out Russians to an unprecedented scale, according to video and picture evidence. This is coming simultaneously as Ukrainian and Russian forces have launched massive drone attacks over the past 24 hours, and the Ukrainians have been able to claim another major hit on a significant Russian oil refinery within the city of Samara, knocking out another one of the major Russian oil refineries inside the Russian Federation, and once again causing significant damage to the Russian war industry and Russian war machine. Meanwhile, we have been able to hear that outside of Ukraine, the Iranians are now stating that they will be conducting a third major missile and drone attack against the state of Israel in the future, according to an Iranian spokesperson, at a time of their choosing. This is also coming simultaneously as a different kind of a diplomatic development or a different kind of diplomatic scenario has occurred inside of Saudi Arabia, as U.S. and Russian diplomats have arrived for the first higher level meeting talks that we have seen so far. Europe and Ukraine were not present. However, we have been able to hear that the Russian Federation is now asking for unconditional conditions inside of a peace treaty in Ukraine, demanding that they not only keep the current front lines that they have right now, but are also able to receive Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Luhansk in their entirety. And at this point, it does appear that the U.S. negotiators are most likely going to turn down this Russian ultimatum for the large part, as we have also been able to hear other significant news that the Ukrainians and the Turks are now working on their own peace initiative towards the Russian Federation. Erdogan and the Turks have stepped back up to the plate to once again attempt to be a third-party negotiator in between Ukraine and the Russian Federation. An incredibly interesting move, considering that we have largely seen that Ukraine has shifted the Turks largely towards their direction, to the point that the Turkish government has not only been providing Ukraine with warships, but has been providing these warships to Ukraine free of charge. We have also been able to hear inside of Europe that the Europeans will be providing a brand new massive arms deal to the Ukrainians worth 6 billion euros, which is about equivalent to 6.3 billion US dollars here in the short term alone. We've been able to hear significant news over the past 48 hours, and I cannot say enough that while this news is more localized in Ukraine today, the war in Ukraine is kicking off at a fever pitch that has rarely ever been seen up till this point before. We have been able to see
it's crazy. It's crazy for Putin to allegedly be winning. He sure is getting pushed back in so many different places. It's kind of weird. It's like he's delusional or something.
It really does seem as though it is raw delusion that is pushing the Russian Federation at this point, and this is going to be moving us directly into the front lines today, because we've been able to see that Ukraine has achieved what many claimed was unachievable. I have also been one to say in the past that it appears that neither side will be able to gain any large offensive victories, and while that is still largely true, that we will most likely be never seeing any major victories on the battlefield at this point, taking large swaths of ground back from the Russians, or the Russians taking ground from the Ukrainians, a major victory has been achieved today in the fact that the Ukrainian armed forces have been able to stop all Russian offensives on all fronts, and not only that, push the Russians back onto the defensive. This is a major ordeal, especially considering the diplomatic situation surrounding Ukraine at this point, with the Russian Federation and the United States now attempting to try and create some sort of a peace inside of Ukraine, whether people agree with how that is being done or not. We are seeing that the Ukrainians are showing that they are not out of the game whatsoever at this point, and that the Ukrainian armed forces actually has the strength and ability to put the Russians on the defensive in every single front line that exists inside of Ukraine. This comes at no sooner a time than was necessary, as the Ukrainian armed forces have a lofty goal to show. The goal is to show to the United States and to the Russian Federation that the Ukrainian armed forces and the state of Ukraine as a nation has gone through 3 years of bloody, horrendous war. It has been a war that we have seen the most devastation ever reach the face of Europe since the end of World War II. And the fact of the matter is that while it has been one of the bloodiest and most devastating conflicts on the face of Europe since the end of the Second World War in 1945, the Ukrainian armed forces are still able to conduct a large enough and strong enough offensives at this point in the war to actually put the Russians onto the defensive during the spring, which is one of the more important times to put the Russians on the defensive on all fronts. Right now is the point where the Russian Federation would largely attempt to try and start new offensives before the Rasputitsa really became incredibly severe, or for that matter, in other years, we have also seen that the Russian Federation will use this time as a lull to be able to gain enough equipment and arms into a specific area to be able to conduct a brand new offensive by the late spring and the early summer. With the Ukrainians conducting these massive offensives throughout all fronts, we are going to be seeing that the Russian Federation is going to have its hands tied with sending this additional manpower and resources that they may be attempting to muster at this point into the defensives alone. Otherwise, the Ukrainians could start to push them back, and all offensive planning, and largely defensive planning for that matter, will be thrown aside, and the Russians will have to simply work on defending their territory. This kind of strategic planning by the Ukrainians is actually incredibly good, and coming at a perfect time, not only on the diplomatic realm, but on the strategic areas of the battlefield. And we have been able to see this in no less of a sort than in the Battle of Toretsk. The Battle of Toretsk has been one that has not really been mentioned a lot here on this channel, and other channels don't really mention it much either. The large ticket item battle that's actually going on right now is the Battle of Pokrovsk, where the Ukrainians' major crossroads throughout the entirety of southern Donetsk may be in jeopardy if the Russian forces were able to encircle and take the town. However, Toretsk is less significant, but still a major battle nonetheless, as Russian Federation forces have been dedicated heavily to this battle and have been attempting to drive through Toretsk and then eventually up the highway to Konstantinivka. Konstantinivka being a supply node connected to Pokrovsk that helps to support and supply reinforcements and ammunition to the Ukrainian forces that have been defending Chasiv Yar for well over a year at this point. Not only that, Konstantinivka also serves as a major supply node for the Ukrainian forces based out of Kramatorsk and Slovyansk, although Kramatorsk and Slovyansk in their own rights are major versions of the city of Pokrovsk, serving as supply nodes and headquarters for loads of Ukrainian units that are operating all the way from Makivka and down towards the area of Toretsk and even further beyond, possibly towards Pokrovsk. The Ukrainian army knows that the Russian offensive in this area is one that has to be turned around at all costs. The Russian Federation cannot be allowed at this point to push through Toretsk, as this will start to put Konstantinivka, a fairly significant supply node at this point, in jeopardy. And the Ukrainian forces started to conduct counteroffensives inside of the city itself over the last 24 hours, and the results have been unbelievable. The Russian Federation's offensive through the city has actually been stopped, and it does appear that the Russian Federation is now on the defensive and attempting to use a major amount of artillery fire to try and suppress the Ukrainian offensive and once again put the Russians back onto the offensive through the town. We have been able to see that the Ukrainian armed forces have been bombarding and clearing positions of the Russian Federation inside of Toretsk. Starting off with our first clip, we were able to see the young team clearing a Russian position in Toretsk as a part of the counterattack inside the city today. We're able to see them lobbing a grenade into that basement.
An odd-looking grenade, too. It's like a blue canister.
Man, honestly, it almost seemed like some sort of like an archaic mine. And we can now see them throwing a brick of something that Pablo Escobar would call the goods down into the basement. And it appears that it was possibly a large enough charge that they backed up a good deal. And we can see smoke rising from that former basement, now most likely a crater, as the Ukrainians continue to cover it after wiping out the Russian position.
And also people were saying that was a smoke grenade, by the way. The first thing you threw down there, that was actually smoke.
Interesting. Let's go look at that smoke grenade again. Huh, yeah, you know what? Yeah, that was a smoke grenade. I'm blind. Like, I was like, what is that? That is 100% a smoke grenade. But let's see here. What is the other thing that he threw? I couldn't really tell what it was, but that looks to me to be some sort of an improvised mine or a bomb. It's one or the other.
It could be Acme created, actually.
It could be. I like how it's just a tin box with a large fuse on it. It may as well almost be a cartoon bomb, you know, like the black round ones that you see in the cartoons. Almost like that. But still, it does appear that at least in this one clip, in a limited glimpse into the battle in Toretsk, the Ukrainians are not only starting to push the Russians back, but also wiping out positions of the original front line that the Russian Federation had manned in this area. We were also able to see a Ukrainian soldier suppressing Russian forces with an MG5 today within one of the northwestern areas of the city of Toretsk.
Damn, okay. It's a machine gun, I guess.
I'm not gonna lie, the sound of the MG5 is incredibly clean. Like, that's actually a very nice sounding machine gun.
It really is. It sounds very, very clean.
We now see them moving out after they lay down some suppressing fire. I also want y'all to know, just a small little thing to observe at the beginning of the clip. When the artillery landed, the car alarm turned on and then immediately turned off. So that apparently was someone's car that was being used by one of the armed forces on the battlefield, either the Ukrainians or the Russians. And they were ready with the key fob to turn the car alarm off immediately. They were like, oh, beep, and then they turned it off. Listen. And then it goes off, like someone was ready with the key fob to turn off the car alarm on whatever that was. But nevertheless, it is nice to see the limited glimpses that we got today into the Ukrainian counteroffensive inside of Toretsk. And to show y'all a little bit of an overview of the actual battlefield they're fighting through, here is a drone view of what Toretsk is currently looking like right now, with the middle of the battlefield being inside of the city itself. And here's the clip.
It honestly looks like a complete wasteland.
It is nearly a complete wasteland at this point. The only signs of life that exist in Toretsk anymore are the Russian forces attempting to push through the city, and the Ukrainian forces, which are now heroically pushing back through the remains and ruins of Toretsk to try and drive the Russians back on the defensive and stop them from threatening the town of Konstantinivka just further northwest from here. The town has been reduced to ash for the large part. It is a horrendous sight, but inside of this horrendous scene that y'all are watching here on this drone footage, one of the most heroic struggles and battles is being conducted right now by Ukrainian forces during this brand new offensive that started just in the past 2 days as they attempt to hold the Russians and drive them back to the outskirts of Toretsk on its eastern end. A very wild sight to see, and we not only were able to see that, but we were also able to see the Ukrainians continuing to hit forces inside of the city, but this time, of course, as you all know, the Ukrainian police have to be present. The Ukrainian police are largely present in the city of Toretsk, more so than any other area, except for the city of Vovchansk in that battle, and we are able to see that the Korda unit, which is a special forces unit of the Ukrainian police, was doing a little bit of its work today inside of Toretsk, and making sure to deal some devastating blows to the Russian Federation's armed forces inside the town. We can see the Russians wandering around and climbing into the window of a building as the Cord sends in a drone straight into the wall, which appears to have hit right in the middle of all of the windows. We can now see some Russians outside of another wrecked building, and we can now see another FPV drone coming in and attempting to hit those Russians on the outside of the building. We can see that the place is practically crawling at this point with Russians, and the Cord unit continues to send in FPV after FPV to try and clear out the Russians from this one block. And it does appear that at this point, the Russian Federation is not doing incredibly well in the city, as it seems as though they are continuing to be put on the defensive farther and farther, and more frontline positions are beginning to be wiped out. The Russians, of course, have noticed this, and it appears that some Russian units on the battlefield do have working radios to be able to coordinate with the artillery and the rear lines to explain that it appears that the Ukrainians are beginning a new counteroffensive through the city and that they require a considerable amount of artillery support. The Russians appear to have dedicated and actually brought in other artillery units specifically to deal with the Ukrainian offensive that is inside of the city today, as we have been able to see Ukrainian positions throughout the area of Toretsk being shelled heavily, videos coming from today, that is, showing that the Russian Federation is attempting to suppress the Ukrainian units and largely stop their offensive by fixing them in place, as they'll largely have to dig in and hide from the artillery shelling that the Russians are firing at this point. And here is one of the clips showing that shelling in the middle of the counteroffensive today. You can see smoke and fire rising over the buildings below, most likely from the artillery that landed a little while ago.
Сейчас их выкуривают. Плюс.
And they look kind of comfy in there, actually.
Nice and cozy.
You see him looking out onto the remains of Toretsk outside.
Який ти сектор контролюєш?
У мене сектор відповідальності на 9, але тут вже карта ляже.
Плюс.
Oh, that's new. I thought that was like the you know that logo, Matthew, the one that used to go.
The THX logo, the
Yeah,
one
that
theaters
one.
that like bust the speakers out.
Yeah, dude, I thought that was that. Like, I was legitimately got scared there for a little bit. I was like, are we about to get copyrighted? But apparently it's just a little bit different. But we did get to see some more artillery being fired by the Russians in Toretsk today, once again attempting to suppress the Ukrainians inside the city. Also, by the way, nice AGS right there that the Ukrainians have, or it's a Mark 19. Can't really tell, but still pretty neat to see that they had one positioned right at this window. And the artillery is almost coming down right on top of them.
Я ебу, блядь.
Ой, блядь.
В подвал, нахуй.
Oh, блядь.
One does have to remember that the Russian Federation is trying to use drone forces to a far greater degree at this point in the conflict, so Russian artillery fire has actually gotten more accurate because of their drone spotters that are able to coordinate with the artillery and adjust their fire as they are conducting the fire mission. That's why the artillery is getting fairly close to Ukrainian positions, and that's also why at this point it is a decent danger, or at least a risk at this point, that if Russian artillery fire is directed enough into this direction and is voluminous enough that it actually could stop this Ukrainian counteroffensive in the town before it really has life to begin. So hopefully we will be able to see that the Ukrainians are able to direct a decent amount of drone forces and also artillery into the counter battery role to quiet the Russian guns and continue the Ukrainian counteroffensive through the town of Toretsk. This is one of the largest and most voluminous amounts of video evidence that we have gotten out of a single battle on a single day in weeks. The fact that we have gotten this much video evidence in a single single day largely leads us to believe that the Russian Federation is getting hammered in Toretsk. We have seen that usually battlefield activity directly correlates to the amount of videos that are coming out of a front line in a single day, and this is showing that Toretsk is the heaviest and hottest area of the front line at this point, and it appears that the battle must be one of significant size. Of course, we only get to see here on the channel small glimpses into this battle right now, really from the Ukrainian side alone, but we are expecting that over the next few days, we'll most likely get reports from the Russian military bloggers in, which will start to denote whether things are going good or bad. Crazily enough, as the war has continued, Russian military bloggers have become a lot more transparent about the fact that Russian Federation's forces are not doing that well inside of some battles, for example in the Battle of Pokrovsk, and if they start to say that it appears that Russian forces are having a tough time in Toretsk, we will be able to know and confirm at that point that the Russian Federation is on the defensive inside the Battle of Toretsk and most likely getting pushed back through the city. Moving on out of the city of Toretsk, however, one thing that is even more important to mention is that while the Ukrainians are giving a hammering to the Russians on the battlefield, not only in Toretsk, but also down in Pokrovsk and Velika Novosilka, and even in Kursk today as well, they are also hammering the Russian Federation where it really counts the most at this point in the conflict, which is deep inside the Russian Federation. Actually, crazily enough, about a whopping 660 miles inside the Russian Federation today. This moves us on over to the town of Samara. The town of Samara is like really any other that exists along the area of the Volga River, a fairly large city built during the Soviet Union for the most part for industrial purposes, and not only that, in the modern Russian Federation serves a significant artery and vital corridor for the Russian Federation's economy, as most major cities inside the Russian Federation are based somewhere along the banks of the Volga River, Samara being one of them. Not only that, but Samara has a significant oil refinery, as you can see right here, one of the larger ones inside the Russian Federation at this point, producing hundreds of thousands of barrels of usable fuel products per day. The Ukrainians attacked and destroyed a significant part of this refinery overnight, and this is once again a major loss to Russian Federation forces inside of the conflict, and also the Russian economy, as we largely understand that on any given day, the Russians are consuming about 700 to 900,000 barrels of usable fuel products that they are not able to replace, meaning that right now the Russian Federation is in a near 1 million barrel deficit of usable fuel products per day. Any additional damage that the Ukrainians are able to add on to that only increases the losses on any single day to over 1 million barrels of usable fuel products being consumed on any given day. The consumption is immense, and the Russians really cannot keep up with it. The only way that the Russians can hope to keep up with these kinds of losses at this time in the war is to be able to ensure that their refineries are somehow able to churn out unholy amounts of usable fuel products, which is simply undoable. A refinery only has a maximum capacity that they can reach and they cannot exceed. But the other thing that the Russian Federation can do is that they can try and buy and import usable fuel products from other countries around them, which of course is a fairly daunting task in itself, considering that the entirety of Europe no longer trades in any kind of fuel products for the large part with the Russians, especially the importation to Russia of usable fuel products such as gasoline, diesel, and aviation grade jet fuel, and really other countries such as Kazakhstan simply cannot meet the demand that the Russians have, and this drives the price of Kazakh gas, diesel, and aviation grade jet fuel through the ceiling, meaning that the Russian Federation, while they might even try and scrounge up the money, really can't even find the resources around them to be able to get that much fuel, to be able to stop this massive bleed of the Russian strategic oil reserves. And the loss of this refinery today, at least even in a temporary time window, will be posing considerable issues for the Russians down the line. We were able to see video evidence that the Samara refinery had been hit and damaged significantly by Ukrainian drone strikes as fires brewed across the entirety of the refinery, once again showing that another linchpin of the Russian fuel industry is now down and out for the count, at least for a couple of weeks, maybe even months at the best. But we were also able to get some additional clips of that as well, where we were able to see the successful attack from another angle. This is the same angle that we just saw a little while ago, but this is a new one, actually showing that there are several hits that have been made on the facility, at least 2 from what we can tell, and that the damage may be more extensive than the first clip suggested, meaning that this refinery may be put out of action for several months as repairs are effected. Or we have also seen a trend and this is a much more promising trend for the Ukrainians in the long term than any, that some Russian oil and gas companies no longer have the funds necessary to be able to pay for the repairs on their refineries. And in some instances, we've seen at least 2 refineries at this point get completely shelved and largely turned off indefinitely because they are no longer able to finance the repairs to these refineries because of the massive loss of profits that they've been suffering because of Ukrainian drone attacks over the course of the entire war. This is something that may lead to the death of the Russian Federation for the large part, economically, and of course, as a result, strategically on the battlefield. Even more so than the Ukrainian offensives that are going on today, and there's still many more that we have to cover throughout that entire area. It just does not look like, at the moment, that the Russian Federation really has a chance or can pose a chance to be able to keep the war going for that much longer. I would largely expect at this point that if we were to say how long could the Russian Federation last at its longest, if everything went perfectly for them and the trade winds were good, they'll most likely be able to last another 1.5 to 2 years at best. I would largely say in a worst case scenario for the Russian Federation, they may not survive till the end of a year from now, or about 365 days from this point. The economy is doing horrendously. The Russian military is doing far worse. We'll actually get into the details of that here in a minute, because we have been able to see more video and picture evidence showing that the Russian Federation has largely run out of vehicles to issue to the Russian army, and that donkeys are actually now being used as supply mules, no joke, in the large scale, or in the army scale at this point. And so it does seem as though, at this point, the Russian Federation is actually on the ropes. It's no doubt about it at this point, especially on the economic level, that the Russians are on the ropes, and that if the West continues to apply further pressure to the Russian Federation, they may not be able to survive the conflict alive, for the large part, not just unscathed, but alive at all. But moving on out of that, we have also been able to hear some interesting developments on another front, and this is coming because of a result of something else that's happened down in Riyadh today in Saudi Arabia. The Turks are back on the scene. Many people don't really like the Turks, and there's a decent reason for that. They largely go against American and Western interests in Syria. They largely go against American and Western interests when dealing with Iranian proxies. They largely go against a great deal of things that the United States and the Western sphere would consider beneficial and crucial to them. However, in some other instances, the Turks actually do benefit the West. For example, their undeniable support for Ukraine over the length of the conflict. We have been able to see that the Turks have provided a massive amount of military equipment and aid to the Ukrainians over the course of the entire war, and not only that, have been one of the main negotiators to release Ukrainian prisoners over the earlier period of the war, and even still to this day, they play a major role in the brokerage of the prisoner exchanges that occur in between the Russian Federation and the Ukrainians, and largely keeping that a one-to-one exchange. One Ukrainian soldier for one Russian soldier in a different exchange of prisoners. However, it appears that the Turks recently have been spurned to action once more, this time onto the side of Ukraine, as the Turks are now attempting to get involved in some sort of a peace negotiation in between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. And we have been able to hear a lot of developments about this in the diplomatic sphere today, as Zelensky has stated, "As president of Ukraine, I will not accept any ultimatums from Russia." And this is also coming today, we'll get into this here in a second, from a lot of the statements that the Russian Federation, or specifically Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister of the Russian Federation, has made today inside of Riyadh. Zelensky and Erdogan have begun bilateral talks on resolving the war in Ukraine. The Turkish president, Erdogan, reaffirmed his support for Ukraine's territorial integrity and stated that Turkey is the ideal location for negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. Erdogan also emphasized that Turkish businesses are interested in supporting Ukraine's post-war reconstruction, a larger part of Turkey's many-sphere within a sphere concept that Erdogan has been pushing for largely over the past 15 years. Volodymyr Zelensky made it clear that he will not accept any Russian ultimatums. He also noted that negotiations between Russian and U.S. representatives in Saudi Arabia are taking place without Ukraine's participation, something that we still haven't gotten to yet, but we will be getting to here in a moment. Both the European Union, the United States, the UK, and Turkey must be involved in discussions on a peace plan and development of security guarantees for Ukraine, according to Zelensky, as a direct quote from the conference in Ankara today. Zelensky also took part in the official official opening ceremony of Ukraine's new embassy in Ankara just recently. And meanwhile, Reuters, citing sources, reports that the President of the United States, special envoy for Ukraine, is set to travel to Kyiv this evening. And it does appear that there is a lot of diplomatic action and goings on in the background, as it appears that the Ukrainians and the Turks are now attempting to take some sort of an initiative to actually spearhead the peace talks and largely lead from the front, at least as the Ukrainians are concerned, instead of sitting on the sidelines and watching the United States and Russia largely attempt to negotiate some sort of a peace agreement without Ukrainian involvement whatsoever. And many people have been talking about this, especially considering the situation that the Russian Federation finds itself in militarily and economically at this point. Turkey has begun talks with Ukraine to attempt an end to the war, and a lot of people are talking or really considering whether Turkey is a viable mediator or not. And some are saying that Turkey is certainly a viable mediator. Others are saying that it's worth a try, what could go wrong, and some others are saying that Turkey will not be effective. Crazily enough, this is one of the most split results that I've ever seen. It's almost a third in every direction. And Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so it looks like 33% of the audience said yes, Turkey is a viable mediator, while 29% said it's worth a try, I guess, and 29% also said no, Turkey will not be effective. And honestly, it's a little bit hard to tell if Turkey would be effective, because Turkey does Turkey things, which means riding the fence, and sometimes we're really not sure who they're supporting. Sometimes it seems like they're supporting Ukraine, and then sometimes it seems like they're supporting Putin. So it's really hard to tell. And also, I'm not sure if Turkey really has the leverage to actually be an effective mediator, but only time's going to tell on that. So I'm going to say I'm with the 29% that says it's worth a try, but I'm really not super confident that Turkey is able to pull anything off. But at least it sounds like Turkey is at least a little bit on Ukraine's side, which is, of course, a good sign. But I wonder what Turkey has to gain out of this, is why they're suddenly getting involved. I wonder what that is. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I would believe that the Turks actually are a viable mediator. That's going to shock a lot of people, because a lot of people know that I'm not really a big fan of the Turks. And I largely still am not. I'll actually be honest with y'all. I generally believe that the Turks operate against Western interests for the large part. If we were to weigh everything all together, the Turks are not that beneficial to the West at this point, with the kind of governance and administration that they have and their kind of foreign policy objectives. Most of the things that they're doing in their own interests largely go against collective Western interests as a whole. However, one thing actually is clear, that Turkish interests actually align with the West's in a very rare instance with Ukraine. The Turks, to explain to all of y'all here really quickly why the Turks do the things they do, this actually is an explanation I used to give a long time ago, but we kind of stopped giving out. But I'll explain to all of y'all really quickly, because it's something very important to understand about the Turks and where we could actually find some common ground here on this one particular thing, when we can't really find common ground with them on anything else. Turkey is a country that has evolved a lot in not really a necessarily good way over the past 40 years. Back when Turkey was originally founded, Turkey was actually a entirely secular country. As a matter of fact, it was as secular as the French. And just to explain this for many of our American viewers, there's actually a distinct difference in between freedom of religion and freedom from religion. The United States practices a concept in our government called freedom of religion, meaning that you can have any right to believe what you would want to believe on a religious level, and also that might be able to guide your decision-making inside the government. But at the same time, the U.S. government cannot officially recognize any religion over another or put one down unnecessarily against other religions. However, in France and Turkey, it's an entirely different thing on the constitutional level. France and Turkey have freedom from religion, meaning that, yes, you can practice whatever religion you would like inside of France and Turkey, and in fact, that's none of the government's business at all. But if you were to ever make any kind of decision inside the French or Turkish government on a constitutional level that was guided by religion, or wear any religious imagery, or wear any religious clothing inside of the French National Assembly or inside of the Turkish National Assembly, that is grounds for imprisonment. Any kind of religious display is grounds for imprisonment or severe punishments inside of France and Turkey, completely different than that of the United States, where one can openly profess a religion as a president or a Congress member or a Supreme Court justice, and that's totally fine. Same thing in France and Turkey, technically would get you in a great deal of trouble. However, things changed a lot in Turkey over the past 40 years, and Turkey's largely started to move towards being a lot more religious in some ways and less than others. Erdogan has a concept where Turkey is going to become the Ottoman Empire of the modern day. But it's a very interesting kind of a way that they're going about it. Turkey isn't going to territorially conquest its neighbors and bring them back into the Ottoman Empire in that way. Turkey is going about it in a way that's almost Chinese in form economically. They are attempting to draw in all of the Balkan states into a Turkish economic relationship. This has a lot to do with Turkey's financial investments into the Danube River area, because they're trying to turn the Danube River back into a major economic corridor that is largely invested and funded in by the Turks, meaning that a lot of these countries would have some sort of economic connection to the Turks and therefore would be largely compelled to have economic relations with the Turkish government, meaning that the Turks would be receiving a great deal of income off of that trade. But at the same time, the Turks are having to deal with another situation in the Middle East. And in the Middle East, they try and more so push the ideological objective, trying to see or show to many Middle Eastern countries that ideologically Turkey is on a common ground with them. And so if they're to trade with anyone, they ought to trade with Turkey, because Turkey gets them, and not really anyone else gets the Middle East. That's largely what the Turks try and portray to the Middle Eastern countries. Ukraine, crazily enough, actually ties directly into this Turkish attempted sphere, because Ukraine actually has to pass through the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles to get into the open world at large, meaning that Ukraine has to deal with the Turks to conduct any kind of trade. And what better way for the Turks to show the Balkan states and the Middle East that Turkey is the option for them than to strong-headedly support one of those countries that is within their economic interests, not only economically, but militarily. That's why the Turks are talking about they want to financially invest in Ukraine post-war, because the Dnipro River, much like the Danube, is also a major economic corridor for the Ukrainians and for trade traveling into the Black Sea and then into the greater world at large. Ukraine has a lot to benefit from Turkish support, and Turkey has a great deal to benefit from, even in their own self-interest in supporting Ukraine. And this is one of the few areas where the Turkish mini-sphere attempt actually ties directly into Western and American interests, because we both find common ground in supporting Western interests in Ukraine. And so for this reason, I actually do believe that Turkey is a very good mediator in this specific instance, because they actually have their own interests on the line when trying to broker some sort of a peace arrangement. So they're going to make sure, even if they do make concessions to the Russians, that it is entirely fair, because they want to make sure that Ukraine is still going to be apt to trade with them and conduct business with the Turks, which will give them a decent amount of money. With that in mind, I actually would say that I'd have to be with the 33% that said that the Turks are going to be a very good negotiator, because it's one of the few times that they actually have intersecting interests with the United States, and that they actually would conduct some sort of a peace arrangement that would be amenable to both sides, especially to the Turkish side, because they want to get in on that money making. You know, that's really the big thing for the Turks at this point. And also, let me quickly show y'all something here. This is something fairly interesting. The Turkish economy has been skyrocketing as of late, and that's largely because their financial investments into the Danube area and the Balkans, and also into the Middle East, are actually finally making dividends. And so they are blowing up economically. They went from having $720 billion as their GDP in 2020. That's now increased by 30% in 3 years, up to 1.1 trillion US dollars, making the Turkish economy...
Also, look at that too. It looks like Saudi Arabia is also having a sudden resurgence as well, according to that chart. It's also shooting up just like Turkey.
It is a really interesting phenomenon with the Saudi Arabians. I don't really know how to explain their economic growth yet. I haven't looked into it too much, but I do know with the Turks, they've actually started to receive a great deal of income, really dividends off of their investments in the Balkans and the Middle East, and that trade's actually starting to directly correlate to increased economic growth to an unprecedented rate inside of the Republic of Turkey. So it looks incredibly good for them, actually. It looks like they're doing pretty good with it, and that's why we also know that they're going to want to keep that gravy train running, so they have a lot riding on if they negotiate the Ukraine war well, because then it will show everyone else in the Middle East and in the Balkans if anyone's going to stand up for you, it's the Turks. So let's trade with them because we have nothing to lose at this point. We make a good amount of money, they make a good amount of money, and the Turks will be around to protect us from anyone else whenever they pop up out there if there was ever a threat. So with that in mind, I hope that addresses very well, at least my perspective, on why the Turks actually would be a very good mediator. Although I'll be honest with y'all, I wouldn't trust the Turks as far as I'd throw them in any other situation. If we were to talk about the Israel situation, hell no, the Turks are not the one. If we were to talk about Iran, hell no, the Turks are not the one. If we were able to talk about Iranian proxies, absolutely not. The Turks are not the one for that. Largely, they work against our interests in every other direction but this one. But in this one specific deal, they do look like they're doing pretty decent. But nevertheless, I hope that does address that, and we're going to be moving on now actually into something that spurned the Turks into this diplomatic maneuver that we're now seeing today, which takes us down to Riyadh. Many of y'all will know that the U.S. and Russian delegations have met in Riyadh just today to start talks about what the future of Ukraine is going to be. We were able to hear that Ukraine and Europe as a whole were not involved in these talks at all, which was, of course, a major shock and upset to Ukraine and the Europeans and has made them largely unhappy. We actually even heard to a point that the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman wanted Zelensky to actually be present at today's negotiations between the United States and Russia, but both the United States and the Russian Federation rejected the idea of Ukraine even being present at the first talks that have ever been occurred that have been conducted directly between the United States and the Russian Federation. According to an unnamed source citing the publication, the Crown Prince planned to inform Zelensky about Saudi Arabia's role in organizing the talks, as well as his discussions with officials from the United States and the Russian Federation. So it does appear that even the Saudi Crown Prince is trying to work towards Ukraine's best interests and not really looking to either enrich the Russians or the United States unduly on the conflict that, once again, the Ukrainians are an active defending party in and are the actual defending party, not the aggressor party. It does appear that the Ukrainians can find a friend in the Saudi Crown Prince at this moment, although it is very evident at this point that the Russian Federation is not going to ever be a friend of the Ukrainians with these sort of statements that were made today by the Russian Federation's diplomatic team. Just to explain this to y'all, not getting political here, but I do want to tell y'all who the diplomatic team heads were. The Russian diplomatic team was headed by Sergei Lavrov, who is the foreign minister of the Russian Federation, very equivalent to the Secretary of State of the United States of America, and the American diplomatic team was headed by Marco Rubio, who is currently the Secretary of State for the United States of America. It appears that it was not entirely, and this is something I do want to point out that's interesting. We did hear from the President of the United States that it was going to be a meeting in between the President of the United States and the President of the Russian Federation. In reality, it turned up being a meeting of the Secretary of States of both respective countries, showing that apparently an agreement could not be made by the United States and Russia to actually have both presidents arrive inside of Saudi Arabia. Already once again showing us that the Russians must be the ones that are obstinate at this point on ever actually moving forward with full-on peace negotiations or good faith attempts, as it doesn't appear that they were willing to meet in the middle, and so instead the United States just attempting to push a talk sent their Secretary of State instead, and the Russians sent their foreign minister. It was made clear by no circumstances that there's not going to be a damn thing coming out of this for the United States at all, even, because the United States would largely have to conduct a complete appeasement, unbelievably so, even worse than the Munich Conference of 1938 under Neville Chamberlain, to ever appease the Russians. Here are some of the statements that actually came out today from Sergei Lavrov in the middle of these discussions, and also Nebenzia, who was also present in the discussions as well. Nebenzia stated that Ukraine must cede parts of Donetsk, Zaporizhia, Luhansk, and Kherson that are not yet occupied by the Russian Federation. The Russians' supposed legal claim to this is that in 2023 they conducted quote-unquote referendums throughout all of the occupied areas to see if they wanted to be a part of the Russian Federation. And believe it or not, folks, over 90% of all the voters, according to the Russians, voted that they actually wanted to be a part of the Russian Federation. So the Russians illegally, right now, by these sham referendums, are claiming the entirety of Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Luhansk. So instead of going with the U.S. arrangement, where they freeze the front lines where they are right now, the Russians are actually insisting that they now take control of the major cities of Kherson, Zaporizhia, Kramatorsk, Sloviansk, and also the remaining sliver of Luhansk that is currently under the control of the Ukrainian armed forces. This is going to be entirely unacceptable to the United States, because while many people are saying and believing that the United States may actually give up on Ukraine, this is unprecedented. This is actually absurd and practically looking for not even unconditional victory over Ukraine. This is looking for unconditional victory over the United States as well. We've also been able to hear today an additional statement from Lavrov completely shooting down an idea that was presented by the U.S. Secretary of Defense at the Ramstein meeting in Brussels just about a week ago. Lavrov stated that deployment of NATO troops in Ukraine, even under other flags outside of a NATO mission, outside of Article 5 protections, is going to be unacceptable to the Russian Federation, meaning that if a peace agreement would be made at this point on Russia's terms, there will be no peacekeepers in Ukraine. Ukraine will be a neutrally aligned country, largely at Russia's whim. They will be entirely at the whims of the Russian Federation, and absolutely no one would be allowed to come to the rescue of the Ukrainians if the Russians wanted to start a second war. Quite literally, poison the Russian Federation for a new war that would most likely begin just a few years now from when this peace agreement would be made. This is something that I'd have to say, and I know this for certain, that the Russian Federation will not ever see the United States agree to such egregious terms. I know some people, and maybe this is a well-heated belief, I'm not entirely sure. Some people believe that the president is largely wanting to make it look like he's just slightly amenable with the Russians. Others are saying that the leader of the United States is never going to accept any sort of arrangements like these. Some others are saying that he may. I can't really be the one to judge. But one thing I will say with absolute confidence is that the United States of America will never accept conditions like these on Ukraine's behalf, because this would make it look like the United States is absolutely weak and feeble to the point that anyone can do anything and run us over. And not only that, not only demand unconditional terms, but unconditional victory over us in a negotiation. This is absolutely absurd. And I have a feeling that the United States and Russia are not going to be finding any common ground in this peace talk alone to lead to Putin and the President of the United States meeting in the future. This is going to amount to a no deal, with these being the conditions that are laid out by the Russian Federation at this point. Whether you have faith in the president or not, or whether you have faith in the president that the president is going to be strong-headed against the Russians or weak against the Russians, you would have to be an incompetent fool to accept these kinds of arrangements. And I'm incredibly certain that the United States of America, regardless of what people believe the president may be, whether it be the last one or this one, I don't believe any president would ever be stupid enough to agree to terms like these, or to even largely entertain them beyond this point. And so I'm going to be expecting that there's going to be a no deal coming out of this one, without a doubt. But many people are actually talking about something else that's been brought out today that has been even more shock to people than what we've heard right now. Intelligence from the West, from different Western sources, is actually stating that Putin is not seeking a peace deal at all, and actually believes that he can win on the battlefield and achieve absolute, unconditional victory over the state of Ukraine without a negotiated or brokered American and Ukrainian peace settlement. Many people are saying that this is true, and Putin is only playing along at this point to entertain the United States in the meantime, while largely pushing to try and conduct some sort of a battlefield victory. Others are saying that Putin probably wants a ceasefire so that way he can rebuild and rearm his forces in a couple of years, and some are saying that only time is going to tell on this one, and the jury's largely out. But a lot of people are saying all kinds of things at this point. Loads of things, as a matter of fact, about this, but it seems as though a lot of people have no faith that Putin is operating in good faith in Riyadh through Sergei Lavrov, and that there really will be no end to this conflict in sight, and that Putin is largely just playing along at this point to try and appease the new American president and lull them into a sense of security. And so, Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So it looks like 76% of the audience said it is true. Putin is just playing along and has no intentions of coming to a fair peace deal, while 10% said it's false. Putin does want a real ceasefire, and 9% said only time is going to tell. And I gotta say that this is not exactly a shocking piece of news right here. It's been pretty clear for a long time that Putin is really not looking to have a real peace deal. He wants to basically set it up to where he can reinvade in a couple of years. So, however that is, he's willing to go for it. And also, he probably does believe in his head that he is winning on the battlefield because in his mind, he can keep scraping his own people up off the sidewalks and putting them right into the front lines, and they don't have any training or any hope of surviving. But still, that will put the Ukrainians on a bit of a back foot because they'll have to keep fighting and eliminating these guys who keep showing up one after another, basically. So I would say personally that Putin probably is playing along, and he probably does believe he's winning in his head, but obviously he's not winning. It's just a complete meat grinder right now. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that, in my opinion, I would largely believe that Putin is largely, most likely, playing along. There is no way whatsoever that the Russian Federation is ever going to actually make a meaningful peace agreement with the United States or Ukraine. I believe that is fairly evident. What the Russian Federation may be trying to do is trick the President of the United States into withdrawing support for Ukraine through some sort of a diplomatic intrigue, and then trying to force a victory in the war just through the fact alone that Ukraine would only be supported at that time by the European Union, or really the European section of NATO, and really no one else. That may be a part of the Russian plan, but I do not believe that there ever will be a sincere attempt at this time by the Russian Federation to end the war. Even with the Russian economy nearly collapsing, even with the Russian military using donkeys in large scale at this point because of lack of vehicles, I still think that Putin has some sort of a insane belief that the war can be won on the battlefield alone. And so I would largely believe that that's probably going to be the direction that the Russian Federation is moving in. And I've also seen, and also really quickly, everyone, I gotta say, I'm terribly sorry if I sound out of it. I don't know if I'm sounding out of it or not. Maybe the monologue sounding really good. I am, for some reason, starving to death right now. I have no clue why. Like, I ate well before the show, and I'm starving to death right now. So I'm like, I feel almost like I'm lightheaded and delirious from it. I'm that starving.
You're starving to death. I've got the world's worst headache right now, and I'm just powering through it. That's why I'm sort of quiet tonight, folks. If you notice that, I'm kind of not talking very much. I'm fighting off basically a migraine right now, so I'm powering through, and so is the Enforcer, powering through the hunger, I guess.
Yeah, I'm hungry for more. But nevertheless, one thing I do want to say about this, I've seen some people saying some things in the chat about something said today. And some people have said, and this is something that actually is true, I've heard it today, that the President of the United States said that Ukraine started the war, not the Russians. Now, I do not know, and I want to say this because I want to give a little bit of a benefit of the doubt. The president sometimes says things that the president doesn't mean to say. That kind of sounds like what people said about the last one, and I would largely have to say I think that may be a misstatement that was made today that is going to be corrected by the press secretary tomorrow, because everybody on Earth knows that the Russian Federation started the war. It wasn't the Ukrainian VDV that was landing at the airports at Moscow. It was the Russian VDV that was landing at Hostomel just north of Kyiv. There's really no way at all that that statement was ever meant in a serious, unironic way or made largely as a serious statement. I believe that may be a complete misstatement, and there's probably going to be a correction about that by tomorrow. So I hope that does address that well. And I see some people saying, well, he still said it, and he did say it. And I got to say, that was one that I really got a knee jerk out of today. I was like, what? I was like, no way. But I largely do think that that may have been some sort of misstatement, because previously, just to outline this, all presidents have said that the Russians started the war, including this current one right here that we're talking about. So I'm not really sure if that was a misstatement or if that was some sort of an attempt to actually place the blame on Ukraine. If they are placing the blame on Ukraine, that's absolutely absurd. I mean, anyone with eyes could see that the Ukrainians didn't start the conflict because the Russians were the ones to invade Ukraine. It's a pretty tough thing to say, that the country that is currently fighting on their own home ground and really has been since day one of the conflict is the aggressor. That's like saying Poland is the aggressor against Nazi Germany in 1939, when everyone would know that that's certainly not the case. So I have a feeling that one of two things are going to happen with that. Either that story is going to continue to be pushed, which would be absurd, or we're going to see that a retraction is made by the press secretary tomorrow in earnest form to try and backtrack off of a misstatement made by the President of the United States. So I hope that covers that somewhat well. And I see some people talking about it. And a lot of people are saying different kinds of things. Maybe he did mean it, maybe he didn't. But that was a statement today that I have to say. Like, I'll just tell you on the face of it, it's such a crazy statement if it was meant honestly that there's no way that actually is serious. Like that's just so absurd. There's no way that actually could be the statement that's being pushed as the truth at this point. So I have to.
Honestly, to me, it sounded like he meant it. I mean, I'm not being political with that. I just heard the statement, being said, and it sounded like it was straight up, like the whole time he was saying it. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting statement to make. I've heard a lot of interesting statements today, just on a neutral level. Some statements coming out that are just you would never think you would hear in a million years coming out about Ukraine. So hopefully those are walked back and not actually stuck with.
And I have to largely say I do think that was generally a serious statement, incredibly serious sounding statement. But the thing is about I do want to remind you all of this. The thing is about that is that he also said that we were going to take Gaza and turn it into beachfront property, and I haven't seen American bombs flying at Gaza anytime soon, and I actually haven't seen the Israelis really invading the Gaza Strip either, or really making any clear statements saying that they're going to do that, which I mean, I don't mean to say this in the most blunt of terms, but it leads me to believe that sometimes, maybe sometimes, the President of the United States may just be talking out of his rear end. So, not to say that in incredibly rude terms, because some people may like the president, some people don't like the president at all. That's not really up for us to decide here on the channel. We're not getting into domestic politics. But that's still something that never happened. And I don't think it was ever going to happen because that was just absolutely, absolutely absurd. Like, everyone in the area went, this is absurd. We said it was absurd. Everyone in America said, this is absurd. The statement was made. It was made seriously. It was actually made in front of Netanyahu as well. And Netanyahu agreed with it, and then nothing happened. So I think that might be a similar kind of a statement that was made today. Once again, made completely in all seriousness, not a tone of sarcasm or a joke about it at all. But it's largely just talk in the wind. I don't really think that this is going to amount to much of anything on the U.S. negotiating stance, and there'll probably be some retraction made tomorrow. Because if there wasn't, that's just absolutely insane. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well, considering that a lot of people wanted to bring it up, and then the same people who brought it up then want to complain that we brought it up and tried to talk about it, but I still want to throw in 2 cents on it. Nevertheless, it is time for us to move on into the remainder of the news that we have tonight. We still have a load to cover inside of Europe and also on the battlefields of Ukraine. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our first question of the night, this one goes to James Hughes, who's of course a longtime channel legend and throws in a very generous $50 donation. And thank you very much, James, for that support and helping to keep us running. And he said, here's my thought. Putin is going to piss our president off. Don. And also, Rubio was giving him an offer he can't refuse. So Putin is going to wake up with a horse head in bed, or a Ukrainian major offensive breakthrough that will lead to his end.
And I thank you for the massive support, James Hughes, and thank you so much for enjoying this channel and helping it to keep on running. If it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep this thing rolling. And I got to thank you massively for that, because if it wasn't for folks like you, this channel just would not be possible. I got to also say that, in my opinion, I believe that might be what's about to happen. I'll actually say there's 2 things that can happen. Either that's going to happen, or the President of the United States is so adamant on wanting to achieve some sort of a peace agreement that almost a Munich kind of conference peace agreement is made. That could also be a decent possibility as well. I'll be entirely honest with y'all. It's so hard to gauge where the President of the United States is right now on this topic. It's really hard to say which direction he'll go in. Like, I'll be entirely honest. One day, they're saying that World War III is coming and that the U.S. is going to be basing forces in Poland. The next day, we're saying that Ukraine started the war. I really do not know what position we're on at this point. It's really hard to follow, and I'm just trying to make sure to, not follow it as much as possible and just state it for what it is at this point, because if I start to follow it, I might get aggravated, like many people have noticed. But Beyond that, though, I would have to largely say I think that that might be a likely course of action, James Hughes, that could happen, or it could go the other way, the complete opposite, and go incredibly bad. But I do thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running and make this thing possible. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. And also, really quickly, I do have to say, just very quickly to folks, please no politics. I see a lot of people bashing the President of the United States. We didn't allow that on the last one. We're not going to allow it on this one. I know that the presidents of the United States do things that are incredibly annoying and incredibly stupid sometimes. Maybe all the time. Like, I'll be honest, like, that almost seems to be the norm these days. However, this channel doesn't allow the bashing of presidents of the United States. You can disagree with things that they do, but we're not going to sit in here and have a let's bash the president of the United States because he's in a certain political camp kind of a deal. That's just not what this channel does. We didn't do it on the last one. We're not going to do it on this one. This is why tonight I wanted to make sure to go into that whole endeavor into maybe the president just misspoke, and while it sounded seriously, he may not mean it, because we largely said the same things for the last one as well, because that's what we try and do on this channel. We're not trying to go over our way to be partisan and bash presidents of the United States or praise them, but I do want to try and explore all the options and state things that I would believe are fairly well, not really straightforward, but explore all of the options. The channel is trying to be an analysis channel, and I know that many people like to hear things from, Ben Shapiro or whoever's on the other side. I don't even know. But this isn't that kind of a channel. If you're into that sort of a deal, go watch their channels. They'll give you that all day long, exactly what you want to hear, and it'll be an echo chamber. But right now, like, that's not what our channel does. That's not what our channel is ever going to do. All I'm going to do is starve to death on air and then give you all the analysis, and then we run with it, and y'all can say that y'all agree with the president, y'all disagree with the president, y'all think it's a bad idea, or y'all think that it's a good idea, and that's just y'all's opinion. But I'm not going to be getting into bashing a president of the United States or really supporting that kind of a deal in the chat, because that starts to really go against the whole framework of the channel that we've had for about 3 years at this point. So with that, I hope that does kind of cover the base well, and kind of lay out the ground rules again for everyone, because I know that many people have very strong opinions about it. I do as well. But at the end of the day, this channel isn't going to be changing much. I hate to say that to some. I know the Lee Spring Army does a lot in supporting fundraisers and helping out in Ukraine, but we're just chit-chatting. If we don't like it, we don't like it. If we like it, we like it, and we move on. But with that, I hope that does cover that well. I'm talking in circles at this point. I'm starving to death here. But with that, it's time for us to move on to the next question.
All right, so our next one goes to Vlad Lozo 1111, who puts in a $20 donation, and thank you very much, Vlad Lozo, for that support. And they said, donating this in honor of my friend Valera Schmigel, who died fighting for Ukraine, and he fought like a lion for 2.5 years.
Dang, I hate to hear that, Vlad.
Me too.
That's very unfortunate. But there are unfortunately many such stories in Ukraine of such a thing happening. But one thing that is important to always remember is that they didn't die without a cause. They died to defend the entirety of Eastern Europe, and Ukraine, of course, is the vanguard of Eastern Europe. It's a very important thing to remember that all of those folks that have died so far on the Ukrainian side in this conflict have had a true cause and purpose to their deaths and the reason why they were out there fighting. I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running and sharing that story, because that's very unfortunate to hear. And I do have to say that hopefully we'll be able to see that none of their deaths were in vain, and that they died with a great purpose and cause, and not only were able to defend the Ukrainian state, but were able to defend the entirety of Eastern Europe as a whole. And so with that, thank you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the last question of the segment, and then we're moving on to the rest of the news. Also, I see a lot of people saying, go get something to eat. Sadly, this isn't like other shows where I can just kind of wander off and get something to eat, because most people wouldn't hang out in dead silence while that's happening for like a couple of minutes. So I largely had to power through until we can get to the speech from Zelensky, if he even had one today, which he probably didn't. So I'll just be starving the whole stream, and honestly mentally absent because of it as well at this point. But anyways, with that, we are on to the final question of the segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of the news.
All right, and this one goes to BC Skyman, who puts in a 20 as well. And thank you very much, BC, for also being a longtime channel legend and helping to keep the channel running like always. And we appreciate that very much. And he did not leave a comment, but Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta thank you so much for the massive support, BC Skyman. Didn't throw in a comment, but the support means a lot and helps us to keep this channel running. And I gotta thank you massively for that, because once again, if it wasn't for folks like you, we would have just never been here for this long. So with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, it's time for us to move on into the remainder of the news tonight. We were able to hear that the Europeans are going to be moving on into a $6 billion military aid package here in the future. The package will include large donations from existing European stocks, another 1.5 million artillery shells for Ukraine, air defense systems, and other kinds of equipment used by the Ukrainian armed forces on the battlefield. A very significant contribution by the Europeans to the continued Ukrainian war effort. We have also been able to see inside of Western Ukraine, and a huge thanks to Britt Barlow for the massive support.
Hey.
Ole moly! And we also were able to see a brand new MiG-29 livery on a Ukrainian MiG-29 today. Looked really nice. It's apparently called, I believe, the Black Knight. Oh, actually, the Ghost's livery. I was about to say the Black Knight. That's usually what the British call it when they put pretty much like just black out a vehicle like a tank. But still, pretty cool to see that kind of a livery. And also cool to see all the support vehicles out here on the tarmac as well next to that MiG-29. Moving on from that and into our next bit of news, we were also able to see up in the Kursk Oblast, the Ukrainian Steel Brigade hitting some Russian forces. And so here's the clip. And we can see the drone coming on in. And we can see it hitting the bunker dead on. An impressive hit right there. And we see another drone coming on in and slamming right down into another Russian position. Boom, shakalaka billiard. And we see them continuing to obliterate the positions. Holy moly!
Absolutely smashing them. Smashing.
And that's the end of the clip right there, but very nice to see. Moving on from that and into our next clip in the Kursk Oblast, we also get to see the Ukrainians hitting another Russian shelter. We can see the Russians going into the shelter. In a second, they're about to be put out of the shelter. And here comes the Ukrainians. They're giving out an eviction notice. Kaboom. And there goes the eviction. Very well, Bleed. And that's the end of the clip right there. Very nice to see. And moving on from that and into our next clip, we also get to see the Ukrainians firing a grenade launcher at the Russians in this direction today as well. A Mark 19.
And something about Leopold.
О, поднимай теперь, поднимай. О, хорош! Давай засыпай нахуй! Добре, добре. Хорош, хорош, хорош.
We hear
Хорош.
the impacts of the Mark 19s down the range. We see the Ukrainian riflemen continuing to fire, and the clip ends, but still an interesting one to see from the Kursk area. Moving on out of Kursk, as the Ukrainians have continued their attempts at pushing the Russians back in that area and putting them on the defensive, we also have a load of location unknowns. And we were able to see, starting off well, that the Russians heard an FPV drone in the distance. Oh, it muted. Dagnabbit, man. This is the comedies in the audio. It's a drone, he yells. Oh, blad, it's an FPV!
Oh.
Bam! Oh my god! They're out.
Jeez.
And they're running for the hills. And also, it looks like the FPV just hit. Yeah, it hit right there. And they're all running for it.
It's like the clown car. They're all falling around, jumping and flailing and tripping.
My question is, how many freaking people did they have in that Buhamka? Like an entire platoon came running away from it. It's like, how many people were on this thing? Let's go look. So they had a trailer, and then it looks like a load of people were sitting on the roof of the Bahanka. But I like that one guy who ate shit, like, immediately hopping off, like, right here. Like, bam! It's like, dude. Oh, my lord. And then yeah, right there. But still, that's how the Russians react and from a Russian POV from an FPV drone attack. Moving on from that into our next clip, we also get to see this bizarre abomination, the AK-12 carbine. I gotta be honest with y'all, I hate it. I think it's terrible looking. I'm not really like a big fan, for that matter, of the AK-12. I actually like the AK-74 better. But the AK-12 carbine, I guess this is the AKS-12. This thing is horrendous looking. It looks like they tried to make a crank, but then at the same time, well, it's just terrible. That's all I can really say about it. This is one of the worst looking AKs I've ever seen, and that's saying a lot. But moving on from that and into our next little clip, we also get to see a Ukrainian tanker taking a breather in front of his tank, bliet. He's just sitting there chilling, bliet, like, very nicely. Not like his coffee, though. The coffee is warm, bliet, like a coffee time, bliet. But we also get to see the Russians using donkeys for transport, unironically, today.
Да ладно, не надо. Давай, давай.
They got that poor donkey loaded down.
We can also see Pashek the woodsman up here. He's dressed in his old 15th century attire, and he's protecting the king's stags from poaching.
Давай, давай. Вам тоже удачи. Тут...
Is that donkey loaded down with fuel?
It's water, bliet. They bring water to troops, bliet. But that's a lot of water. I mean, like, holy moly, that's like as much as the donkey weighs.
Тут... Не, у нас сами должны привезти, вот тоже бензин без воды, блядь, вот. Это здесь-то, короче, наши должны, кажется, пролетают, у нас вот на видео ездят.
And this guy's just yelling gibberish at this point as they wander off with their donkey.
Такая техника. Гужевая повозочка.
Well, you see it replaying again, but that is a donkey. And they're actually using it for supplies at this point. That's how bad the logistical situation is that they do not have enough supply trucks, so now they are actually resorting to using donkeys like these. Moving on from that and on into our next clip, we also get to see a little episode of Rudniks, bliet. Do y'all want to see a little episode of Rudniks, bliet?
Sure, go ahead.
Let us see. What is going on the Russian roads today? Bliet! A head-on collision. Like in between the Lada and the Bahanka.
That thing did not hold up good in that little small collision either.
You know, they said, oh, American cars made the plastic so weak. Russian cars made of raw steel. It's like, man, that thing's got like a crumple zone better than any American car I've ever seen. Like the whole engine bay caved in. And then the steam from the radiator began gushing out. Wonderful. But if y'all thought that was not good enough, we have a second section of a Rudniks, bliet. This is a Russian who has a pole attached to his ATV to film him as he drives, kind of like a FOV kind of a deal, you know, like as he takes a drive, he vlogs. But it appears the vlog did not go too well today, for he got hit by an alcoholic. Bam, a Euro 4320 out of the blue.
Man, that ATV held up better than the Lada did.
Dude, ATV made out of a strong Chinesium, Lada made out of weak Stolenium. It's like, you wouldn't believe it. It actually works the other way around. Tofu drag actually means something these days. But moving on from that, we also get to see the Russian casualty report as well, and the numbers were shocking. Oh,
they've only got one Bobcat, though. What the hell's going on? They went down from 2 to 1. I hate to see it, but the other losses, tell us more.
Man, I got to tell you, it's not looking out too well, bliet. Well, actually, according to Miss Decent, keeper of the records, I'm so hungry, I'm delirious. Miss Decent, keeper of the records, at 181 drones is the second highest daily loss, just below 183 on January 13th of this year. Big drop in losses for troops, armored personnel carriers, and vehicles, but here are the losses for the day. 1,170 Russian soldiers have been wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 12 armored personnel carriers, 74 supply trucks, 12 main battle tanks, 53 artillery systems, 181 drones, 2 MLR GRSs, 1 cruise missile, 1 anti-aircraft warfare system, and a bobcat in a pear tree. And it was a great day. It was a pretty decent day. But now it's time for us to get on into the rest of those front lines and to show you all the business. Moving on down into the Kupiansk area, we did get to see some Russian forces getting hit around here by the FPVs. And they were hitting them hard. Hitting them harder than some folks hit folks that owe them money. I couldn't make that joke too descriptive. YouTube might not be happy with it. The Ukrainians are beating the Russians like they owe them money, and I guess they do. They owe them reparations, and the Ukrainians are knocking for them. And I mean, they are smacking them. My God. Have you ever seen anything like this? The carnage. It's amazing right here. Look at it. Look at it. But moving on from that and then into our next clip, we also get to see a North Korean Kursk sign being destroyed. But here it is. Actually, let me mute that just, because we know it has music in it. But there goes the Kursk sign. That thing got obliterated right there. Absolutely smacked to smithereens. Beaten to death by a Ukrainian bomblet. Very nice to see. Very good to know that they're able to do that kind of a deal and inflict that kind of a damage onto them. You know what I mean? But moving on from that and on into our next clip, we also got to see that the Russians put a guy with prosthetics back in the front. Because as we all know, his injuries are not service-related. Where is the freaking audio on this thing? Ah, here we go.
Вот это вот вниз я спускаюсь. Вот здесь вот дорога. Вот так вот, видите, вот через что приходится ходить. Просто по лесу ходить. По снегу, по колено в снегу. И теперь вот, чтобы мне спуститься вниз, вот это мне надо вниз спуститься. Ступенька, ну полметра где-то у нее высота. И еще 2. И потом направо еще ступенек 10. Сейчас я покажу все. Вот так вот.
See the guys walking on crutches here.
Walking on crutches into a wartime bunker. That's crazy.
They asked him, "Hey, what's your medical condition like?" He said, "It's like the Russian army. I'm crippled here."
Теперь еще вниз квест. Вот такой вот.
He's got to climb down a freaking ladder into the bunker. You got to be kidding me here. This is how the Ministry of Defense treats his heroes. That's what he says. Doesn't forget them. Ah, they forget about it. Sons of bitches, send him to the front. He's got a nub.
Надеюсь, меня видно. Я устал.
When this guy got conscripted, he said the Russian army's going to have to pay him an arm and a leg to keep him in. And then the Russian Ministry of Defense said, nah, actually, you're going to be paying an arm and a leg to stay here. I mean, I got to tell you, it's not a great thing to see, all jokes aside here, to see that a Russian soldier is being forced back onto the front lines that is actually crippled. Like, the guy lost a leg in combat, and so the Russian Federation forces the guy back to the front and keeps him there. I mean, that actually is a pretty crazy thing, to be entirely honest with you all, and an incredibly sad reality that's very common at this point for a lot of the wounded of the Russian Federation's armed forces. But moving on from that, and also so Omega say, wouldn't this guy be a liability in most cases? Absolutely, the guy's a liability in every way at this point to everyone around him, but the Russians just want bodies on the front. That's it. So even if he is a liability to everyone around him, they do not care, and they're going to keep him there. But moving on from that, and down on towards Kremenna, we did get to see the Severonsky Forest as it exists today. That's music, so we're going to mute that. I heard the guitar riff immediately. Has the enforcer been watching The Goodfellas or something? No, I just went into that voice. I'm starved. I'm losing it here. So I just went into that voice and did all that deal because I cannot handle the hunger. I'm so hungry. I could eat a whole cow right now. I'm not lying. But moving on from that and on further down the line and past Toretsk, it's time for us to go to Novobatmakivka, where we get to see a Russian fiber optic drone with a pretty high caliber being destroyed. And there we go. Here's the drone. Bam! Hitting it dead on the nail. Man.
Oh.
Crispy.
Causing a pretty massive explosion. Love to splatter.
Call that the crispy kernel, but this ain't KFC around here. They dishing out mashed potatoes. But moving on from that, that made no sense at all. We also get to see the Russians getting hit by the Raggy unit, and here it is, without further ado. Check it out. Take a look at them. They slamming these Russian forces here with the drones. Raggy, take a look at it.
Look at this. This little buhanka here is not going to stand a chance, and it doesn't.
Man, they ain't standing chances around here. The Bahankas are the biggest target these days. Slam them! Call the Russians mashed potatoes the way the Ukrainians be handing out that gravy. Holy moly, I made it work! Like, I actually made it work! Thank God for turkey and cranberry. That's right, Richard. But anyways, moving on from that, and out of that little clip right there, it's now time for us to move on down into the Pokrovsk area, where we get to see that the Russians are still getting their asses beat, much like they were a couple of days ago when we checked on them. Let's check in on them again. There we can see one. He's just standing around right there, in the middle of the street. Looks like he's walking with some sort of a walking pole there.
It's another crippled fella, it looks like.
Man, the Russians, I suppose that they do not discriminate. But nevertheless, we can see another clip here of a Russian wandering around in the destroyed underbrush. And also, Blair Hara said he had to feel bad to a certain extent. He probably didn't want to be there. I'd promise you he doesn't want to be there. That's why I actually started to say some sympathy for him. Because it really is sad to think that cripples, like this fella here, are on the front line and they're not allowed to leave. And that's the end of the clip, but still showing us a lot of the Russian assault groups in the area walking on crutches. No wonder the Ukrainians are able to outmaneuver them. They got two legs. But moving on from that and into the next clip, we also got to see them hitting some more Russian forces in the 68th Jaeger Brigade. Talk about Jaeger, because the Ukrainians be handing out Jägermeister the way they laying these people out. Holy moly, it's like a crime around here. They said no drinking and driving. The Russians didn't understand. They got hit with the Jaeger. Oh, man. Yeah, McIntosh said that voice is irritating. Well, you know what's irritating? Getting on air and having nothing to eat. I'll tell you, that's what's really irritating. You can't even afford food around here. But anyways, moving on from that. We were able to see another Buhanka pickup moving on around here. And we can see the drone coming on down and slamming into it, right into the back. Here we can see the Jägermeister burger taking out Russian cars driving down the road. Disabled Caps Lock said, "What is that thing? It is an abomination, a roadnik."
What is it really, though? Buhanka with his top cut off?
Man, it's a Buhanka with the top cut off. Well, what kind of Buhanka is that? Well, it's made to rigorous road time standards. Well, what kind of standards are that? Well, it's where the top doesn't come off. You know, something like that. You know what I mean, man? Tell you, man. We're like the walking wounded here tonight. I'm starving to the point of delirium. You got a bad headache. It's a night, that's for sure. And Phoenix Javier said, they don't have white flags, only empty vodka bottles. Hey, listen, man, when you're creative enough, a Smirnoff logo is white enough to be a flag of surrender, all right? Put that thing on a stick and get out there. Like, you know what I mean? Almost turning into Rodney right there. JM said he's losing it. Oh, man, I'm telling you. Oh, man, I'm really losing it around here. Oh, man. Oh, man, I get the respect around here. I eat Chick-fil-A and then I'm starving to death on the show. Oh, man, I'm telling you, I get the respect around here. Not even Chick-fil-A wanted to fill me up. Oh, man, I'm telling you. It's terrible. Oh, man, real terrible. Oh, man. But moving on from that, nice to see the Jägermeisters doing their thing down there. And moving on from that and a little bit further back behind Pokrovsk, we got to see the Ukrainians firing the gun.
Плюс. Готовності вогонь.
We see them reloading the gun and getting it ready to go again.
Вогонь!
Бійці 32-ї
Hello,
окремої
Al.
механізованої бригади зараз ведуть вогонь по російській армії в напрямку Покровська. Буквально тут за лічені кілометри вже відбуваються
And we see this
активні
nice
бойові
fella
дії.
here from Radio Free Europe explaining in Ukrainian how this whole deal is working here with this artillery. And someone's trying to taunt me. Dingbat YouTube said I just ate a Snickers bar. Tasty. Well, you know what's not tasty? Not having one. Like, I'll be honest with you.
Also, I see people saying, can you bring us Snickers? Sadly, we don't have those in the place. There's no Snickers to bring.
There's hardly any food here. Like, there's almost nothing. We're starving. Oh, man, you know what would help? A desk and a chair and a trip to D.C. Oh, man. Oh, man, my life is nothing but suffering. Pity me. Oh, man. The Asset 150 said, it's Tuesday. You can have the bird today. Oh, yeah, we can, Matthew. Get outside now. We can eat the birds. Like it did. We're going to eat them.
Tuesday, and the birds are going to have to go. They're going to be boiled with snow.
There are no birds in America, for all of them have been eaten, except for these, and these will be eaten on Tuesday. Landlord said, order some food, guys. I'm serious. I wish we could, but we would have to talk about what would we want. Where would we want to get it? When would we want it delivered? Someone would have to get it from the front door. That would take time.
Also, people were saying that looked like Enforcer Matt back there in that last little shot right there. I do not look like that. I'm sorry. Go back a second. Go back in this video right here.
Where? This guy?
Yeah, that does not look like me. I'm sorry. That does not look like me. Like maybe like 5% or 10% or something, but no, that doesn't look like me.
Dude, that's like a 50% match.
Nah, I don't think so.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is. It is a 50% match. Man, I'm telling you, it literally looks like, I didn't even realize it. It kind of does look like you a little bit. Wow, what a coincidence, Matthew. You got there's an Enforcer Matt out there on the battlefield right now. But nevertheless, will the Russians be using donkeys for the rest of the war? That's the real question we're here to answer. And a lot of people are saying yes, the Russians will keep using them donkeys. Some others are saying there's no way to know, in all caps, for some reason. Others are saying, no, the Russians will use vehicles again soon. And some people are unsure and undecided. Matthew, what are people saying about that? What are you thinking about it?
Also, some people are saying that was a girl in the last one. I'm sorry, but I saw clearly that looked like a dude. So I don't know if I'm getting mixed up or not, but that looked like a dude to me. But anyways, the poll says, will the Russians be using donkeys for the rest of the war? 84% said yes, they will be using donkeys for the rest of the war, while 6% said no, Russia will use vehicles again soon, and 7% said there's no way to know. And I think they're going to be using donkeys the entire rest of the war, personally, because they can't keep up with manufacturing of vehicles to keep them on the battlefield, and they're getting destroyed too quick. And that's why you're seeing the roadniks pop up in these videos, because they're running out of vehicles. So I'm going to say donkeys are here to stay. I'm with the 84%. But Enforcer, what say you?
The donkeys are here to stay. We've gone over this so many times. It's like beating a dead horse or a dead donkey. But nevertheless, they're going to be around to stay, because the reality of the fact is that the Russians do not have enough vehicles to send around anymore, so for this reason, that's really all they have left. So I hope that does address that well, and we are now moving on into our next little clip, where we got to see a knocked out Bradley near Kurakove. I'm not going to lie, it actually goes kind of hard to just see a Bradley just kind of sitting there on the side of the road, but one of the few Bradleys we've ever actually seen completely knocked out at this point. Moving on from that and into our next clip down in Volodar, we also get to see the Ukrainians firing off rockets from their chopper. Okay, that we are not doing that, but there goes the rockets, and here comes the flares. Poop, and there it goes. I actually just said poop on air. You know, might want to clip that. But there we go. Very nice to see. Good to see that they were able to do another indirect fire support mission. Meanwhile, the 110th Brigade was repelling Russians near Velika Novosoka, another giant assault column. Look at this go. Jason Pate said, they're eating the donkeys, they're eating the horses, and some, they say, are even eating people. We see them hitting him with the MTLBs. Next thing you know, the Russians are going to be putting cornstarch out there like it's a real deal. Come on, Jack, what the hell's going on around here? Russia is a frozen wasteland of ice and snow. Only 110 million people live here. Come on, Jack. One of the most shithole places on earth. Come on, Jack. So why does Russia want Ukraine so bad? Come on. But we can see them just slamming them here.
Oh man, some of these comments are killing me in the live chat. I can't even repeat them, but they're killing me.
Meh. I ain't seen them.
Someone said maybe it's time to grow a beard so people don't know what you look like. And people barely know what we look like now. We've only had like that one podcast that we've done before, and also like one video where we're actually on camera. So I don't know. Like I'm not really a beard person, to be honest. Not really a beard person.
I'll be honest. I have a goatee, but I tried a beard. It didn't look good on me. I ended up looking like Katarov, and that wasn't a good one. And we see them just continuing to hit the Russians. I mean, truly. Susan Henry said, "This is so different than the Shorts daily show on this channel." It really is. It's pretty much just two different shows for two different audiences. Some people like us to goof off and talk a lot. Other people don't like us at all and just want to get the news. I'm fine either way. Like, as long as people are watching your stuff, that's all that matters. And we can see them still slamming the Russians. And we can see them continuing to slam the Russians. I mean, holy moly. And that's the end of the clip, but very nice to see. Moving on from that, now Velika Novosilka, we also got to see the Ukrainians calling in on the HIMARS a little bit down that southern area. And we see them getting ready to target these Russians with the HIMARS. Any second now, it's going to come on down and deliver fury. Any moment now. Any minute. Oh, dead on the nail. An airburst. Tony Kutlia said, "I just come for a certain kind of impersonation." Well, I will tell you something. We are going to put tallow back on the battlefield. It's going to be healthy. That was a bad one. I'm not going to lie. I would give you a refund on that if you unsubscribe over that. I understand. But
I would do it, but I might get an aneurysm if I do that right now.
Man, is it that bad? Is it that bad, Chief?
Yes, it is, but I'm covering it quite well.
Man, yeah, I would say so. I would assume so. But moving on from that, it's time for us to get on up to Kyiv. And I pray dearly that he's got a long one. You gotta be kidding me.
He has no speech. No speech.
You know what, folks? I hate to do this to y'all, but we're going to have to do a rerun. I rarely ever do it, but I am quite honestly, if I keep going, I'm going to collapse. So we're going to just play this back for however long is needed for me to eat, and then we are going to continue on with the second segment where we get to talk to all of y'all. Big apologies. I hope everyone does understand. I made it through an hour and a half starving to death, so hopefully I'll be able to get something to eat, so that way I'm not starving to death. So without further ado, it is time for a replay. Hey! Hey! Speech! Oh, let me get it in English. Where's the English? Oh, anyways. Here we go.
Thank you very much.
Дякую вам дуже.
Thank you so much.
Дякую.
Thank you for your word. Thank you for...
Дякую за ваші слова, за вашу підтримку. Дякую за запрошення.
Dear ladies and gentlemen,
Шановні пані та панове,
at the start of
на початку конференції кожна країна зазвичай говорить про свою позицію, пріоритети, офіційно, відкрито чи неформальні розмови з журналістами з партнерами. І цього року країна, яку навіть не запросили, все-таки дала про себе знати. Країна, про яку всі тут говорять, не хороша. Вночі напередодні Мюнхену цього року російський ударний дрон вдарив по саркофагу, який накриває зруйнований 4-й реактор Чорнобильської АЕС. Це був модифікований дрон «Шахед». Російський дрон, технологія, яку Іран передав Росії, його бойова частина несла щонайменше 50 кілограм вибухівки. І ми бачимо це як глибоко символічний крок Росії. Путіна. Буквально нещодавно в Україні ми обговорювали ключову роль ядерної енергетики у підтримці життєдіяльності країни, попри постійні російські удари по нашій енергетичній інфраструктурі. І ми зараз готуємо проєкт, щоб розширити нашу Хмельницьку АЕС. Буквально за день до Мюнхену я був там, на станції, із залученням від американського бізнесу, включаючи Westinghouse. Цей проект посилить енергетичну безпеку не лише України, а цілого нашого регіону Європи. І ми також нещодавно говорили з президентом Трампом та його командою про атомну енергетику та найбільшу європейську атомну станцію, нашу Запорізьку станцію, яка наразі окупована Росією. І Росія відповіла, запускаючи дрон по Чорнобильському саркофагу, який стримує радіоактивний пил та уламки. І це не лише божевілля, це позиція Росії. Країна, яка наносить такі удари, не хоче миру. Ні. Вони не хочуть, не готуються до діалогу. Майже кожного дня Росія запускає до сотні або й більше шахедів по нас. Кожного дня. Регулярні удари балістичними ракетами і стабільне зростання кількості ударів кабами. Але це не все. Цього року Москва планує створити 15 нових дивізій, додаючи до 150 тисяч солдат. Це більше, ніж національні армії більшості європейських країн. Росія продовжує відкривати нові центри армійського рекрутингу кожного тижня. І Путін може це дозволити. Ціни на нафту досі достатньо високі для нього, щоб ігнорувати світ. І ми маємо чітку розвідувальну інформацію, що цього літа Росія планує відправити війська до Білорусі під приводом військових навчань. Але це точно так само, як вони розгортали війська перед повномасштабним вторгненням в Україну 3 роки тому. Ці російські сили в Білорусі для нападу на Україну? Можливо. А можливо, ні. Чи, можливо, вони для вас? Дозвольте мені нагадати вам, Білорусь межує з 3 країнами НАТО. Вона, власне, стала плацдармом для російських військових операцій. Відповідно до слів Путіна та Лукашенко, Білорусь зараз прийняла заборонену зброю, ракети середньої дальності та навіть ядерну зброю. Путін чітко розглядає Білорусь як просто інший регіон Росії тепер. І ми повинні бути реалістичними. Якщо хтось розгортає військовий плацдарм, ми повинні запитати, що нам з цим робити? І більш важливо, що можемо ми зробити до наступного нападу, наступного вторгнення. Пам'ятаєте, вже були провокації на польському та литовському кордонах з Білоруссю. Міграційні кризи, зроблені російською розвідкою, щоб наростити хаос у Європі. Але що, якщо наступного разу це будуть не мігранти? Що, якщо це будуть російські війська чи північнокорейські війська? Не обманюйте себе, північнокорейці не слабкі. Вони вчаться, як вести сучасну війну. І як щодо ваших армій, вони готові? І якщо Росія розпочне операцію під фальшивим прапором або просто без розпізнавальних знаків з Білорусі, так само як забрали Крим у 2014 році, як швидко союзники дадуть відповідь? І чи дадуть вони відповідь взагалі? Вчора тут у Мюнхені віце-президент США дав чітко зрозуміти. Він сказав, десятиліття старих взаємин між Європою та Америкою закінчуються. Відтепер все буде інакше, і Європа повинна пристосуватися до цього. Пані та панове, я вірю в Європу. І я певен, що ви теж вірите. І я закликаю вас діяти заради вас самих. І заради народу Європи, ваших націй, ваших будинків, ваших дітей і нашого спільного майбутнього. Для цього Європа повинна стати самодостатньою, об'єднаною, спільною силою, українською та європейською. Саме зараз українська армія підтримана глобальною допомогою, дуже вам дякую, стримує Росію, але якщо не ми, то хто їх зупинить? Справді. Давайте будемо відвертими. Зараз ми не можемо виключити можливість того, що Америка може сказати «ні» Європі в питаннях, що загрожують їй. Багато лідерів говорили про Європу, яка потребує власної армії. Армії Європи. І я справді вважаю, що час прийшов. Збройні сили Європи повинні бути створені. Це не складніше, ніж міцно стояти проти російських ударів, як ми вже це робили. Але це не лише про збільшення оборонних видатків, як відсоток ВВП. Звісно, кошти потрібні, так, але лише кошти не можуть зупинити просування ворога. Люди та зброя не безкоштовні, але знов-таки це не лише про бюджети, це про людей. Усвідомлення потреби захистити їхній власний дім.
And Heroam Slava. And with that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky, as it is time for us to move on into the second segment of the stream, where we get to talk to each and every one of y'all. And boy, howdy, is it a fun time. A fun segment, mind you. And I have to say that it's going to be a whole lot of fun, because I have tried to stuff my mouth with as many goldfish as I possibly can. Sorry, everyone, excuse me. And now I feel like I'm okay. Like, I legitimately was sitting there and chewing for like 8 minutes straight, and now my jaws are tired and sore because I was literally doing that as fast as I could, but I now feel fine. So that was the problem, is I was starving to death. So with that, it is now time for us to move on into this segment, and it is going to be an absolute unmitigated blast. And Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our final question segment of the night, we have no more polls to address, and even though we love the polls very much, we are sadly out of them, and we have no more to say anything about. So we will have to move on from that and right into our Super Chat segment, our last one of the night. And our first Super Chat is the largest one of the night that came in from Britt Barlow, who put in a very generous $100 donation. And thank you very much, Britt, for that massive support. And it said, Waffle House on me, an American dining at its very finest.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, Britt Barlow. and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you for saying that the Waffle House is on you. And I got to thank you massively for that. I'll buy us plenty of Waffle House, or maybe one burger from Five Guys with the prices these days. But nevertheless, that is truly American dining at its finest. But in case y'all are wondering, what did the Enforcer have on our snack break? We had goldfish cracker. This is it. That's what I had. I was starving to death. Went into the pantry. We have nothing left. I looked up top, and there were these abnormally yellow, weird, fish-shaped looking crackers. And I ate as many of them as I could. They're incredibly bland, slightly salty, but just right. And so I just sat there and ate them during the whole speech. And then when I was finally done, or felt like I could continue on for a while, then I turned off the speech and we got back on air. But this is exactly what I had. Not as good as Waffle House. Waffle House is truly supreme and far better than anything imaginable. And so I got to thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Britt Barlow, because if it wasn't for massive support from folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running and make the thing possible. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again, and thank you for supporting the channel tonight. Not a lot of people support the channel. Sometimes, other times, there's a lot of support. But I gotta thank you so much for always being one of those folks that's always saying incredibly kind things in the chat. And not only that, tonight, massively supporting the channel, because folks like you are making this stream possible for tons of people. Truly an unbelievable number of them. And so with that, thank you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat here goes to Purple Gerbil, who's of course another longtime channel legend, and throws in a $30 donation. And thank you very much, Purple Gerbil, for the support once again. And the Gerbil said, do you think that the Russians would ever pay reparations, no matter the outcome of the war?
I'm not really sure if the Russians will pay reparations at this point. I think rebuilding Ukraine will economically be on Ukraine or on foreign investors outside of Ukraine. I think that's largely the direction that we're going to be going in at this point, because I do not believe that the Russians will ever be forced to a compromise, or they would pay any kind of reparations to Ukraine or tribute, because the Russians would most likely never accept that unless if they completely collapsed economically, and even then they wouldn't ever have the money to pay the reparations with. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, at least the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat is going to go to Kenneth Becker, who puts in a $20 donation. And I believe that is Kenneth's first ever super chat on the channel. And thank you very much, Kenneth, for that $20 support. And he said, what if America annexed Ukraine?
I wouldn't really be behind that. I'm not really behind the idea of America taking any territory unless if it's Panama, the Panama Canal, I mean. Maybe, depending on that circumstance. But beyond that, I'm not really a fan of the United States taking Greenland or Ukraine or anything else for that matter, or the Gaza Strip. So I generally say, I wouldn't believe that it would be a good idea to annex Ukraine as the United States. Just generally not really in vogue, in my opinion. But still, thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that just addressed that somewhat well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to Dade Carnes, also known as Raid, who puts in a $10 donation, and also a Nightmare Before Christmas that puts in a 10 as well. And I did not see a comment attached to either super chat, but huge shout out to Dade and also Nightmare Before Christmas for helping to keep the channel running. And Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta thank y'all so much once again for the support. Y'all didn't throw in comments, but the support is greatly appreciated and helps this channel to keep on running. And if it wasn't for folks like y'all, we just simply would not be able to make this channel possible. We wouldn't be able to make this thing a reality. We wouldn't be able to keep the news running. And so a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and we now have a super chat from Hatchet. Looks like quadruple zeros, who puts in a $10 donation. They actually put in two super chats, two $10, and thank you very much, Hatchet, for that support. They said, for Vlad Lozo 1111 and his friend and LSA, and also to the people of Ukraine, not much, but with all of us, we can make a difference.
Hey, and thank you so much for support, and I entirely agree. I believe that there is still a good fight to be fought inside of Ukraine, and hopefully we'll be able to see that the Western world and the United States continues to support Ukraine as the conflict goes on. I gotta thank you so much once again for support and the kind words. Folks like you help to make this channel possible and keep it running, and I gotta thank you greatly for being here tonight and helping this thing to keep on rolling. And so with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, so moving on here to our next super chat. Also, let me return back to one real quick. This is the one that went to Nightmare Before Christmas, who put in that 10. They actually did leave a comment, but for some reason, it didn't pop up in my spreadsheet. I wonder why. But returning back to that $10 super chat, once again, thank you very much, Nightmare Before Christmas. They said, I can see a world where Turkey takes over in a Russian sphere as Russia looks weak. And question, please, and LSA.
I could actually see that a little bit. And what's crazy to me is that the Turkish economy is half the size of Russia's as per their 2022 GDP currently, which is really crazy when you think about it. And that Turkey, which it was a little itty-bitty country on the map, has so much economic power. It's this really, really big country. Everyone knows why it's big. It's the Mercator projection, all that business. But beyond that, I would agree. I believe that the Turks actually can supersede the Russians in economic prominence and probably become more powerful than the Russians in the future. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. Thank you once again for support in helping this channel to keep it running. And we're very sorry that we missed your question. But still, thank you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat goes to Mr. Biscuit, who puts in a 20 Australian. And thank you very much, Mr. Biscuit, for that 20 Australian. We appreciate it. And he said, hey, Enforcer, can you please look up the Vampire laser-guided missile system, and from Australia, apparently being used in Ukraine?
And we actually have seen the system before. It has been used in Ukraine, and we have actually seen it. It's a pretty cool little system. It is a design conversion of the Hydra 70 unguided rockets with a laser guidance kit to turn them into precision-guided munitions. These things are actually really cool. I gotta say, I really like them. I think they're neat. And they have been used to great effect inside of Ukraine. That actually is true, Mr. Biscuit. And I haven't seen them used in other areas outside of Odessa and Mykolaiv. Seen them used a lot down there. Rarely ever seen them used anywhere else inside of Ukraine. But I hope that does address that well, or at least give a decent amount of detail about that. But still, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Octavian Timarasanu, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Octavian, for support once again. He said, Putin is playing a tough negotiator to position Russia for favorable terms when its economy collapses, and hoping that Western powers will be more willing to make a deal in the face of economic hardship and LSA.
And maybe so. Maybe that actually is the case. But I would say that the Russians trying to do this dog-headed negotiation tactic, I don't really think it's going to work that well for them in the end, because I'd largely have to agree with what was said earlier by James Hughes, that this might actually piss off the current president and lead them to actually support Ukraine even farther, although I'm not entirely sure on that one. But it still seems like that might be a decent possibility with the Russian choices that have been made so far. But with that, I hope that does address that well. Thank you so much once again for support, Octavian, and helping this channel to keep on running, and being our viewer from Romania. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a super chat this time from Joe's RV Home Turtle, who puts in a 20 once more. And thank you very much, Joe's RV Home Turtle, for that support. And he said, I'm just saying hello.
And oh, hello there, Joe's RV Home Turtle. I gotta thank you so much for the support and helping the channel to keep on running and just saying hello. We're happy to have you in here saying hello. And I gotta thank you so much for supporting the channel, because it's folks like you who support this channel that make it possible for us to run this thing day in and day out, every single day. And I just gotta thank you so much once again, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to be here right now. Also, another thing that we might want to tell you, maybe this is also another reason why I'm just bushed. I was thinking about it. I was like, I ate, and now I'm not feeling like I'm starving, but I feel like I'm still out of it. And I was like, wow, how in the world could that be? And I'm like, well, I know why. I got up with only like 5 hours of sleep today. I was woken up a little bit early, and then for the rest of the day, I was involved in moving and then also setting up some beds. So I think that may be the reason why I might be tired. That doesn't really sound like a lot, and it really isn't a lot. It's just that usually we sit down at this computer all day, every day, just working on stuff that we don't really do a lot physically. So when we do anything, it just wears us out. So maybe that's it. But, you know, beyond that, oh, man, I'm just bushed. But beyond that, we are happy to have you in here saying hello tonight. And I hope that you've been enjoying the stream tonight. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, it's time for us to move on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Con LSA, who put in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Con, for that $10 support. And sadly, I can't read off the whole super chat because it got political, but he did basically say that he believes the statements were meant when they were said about Ukraine at some point today. But thank you very much for the support, Con. And Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta thank you so much for the support. I can't really weigh on those because it's a domestic political thing, and apparently, crazily enough, people have been trying to say I'm getting domestically political all the time. You know, like I condemn, well, not really condemn. I say I don't really agree with some actions. People pay me to be political, and then I try and explore all options. You know, maybe that the president meant it and didn't mean it, and then I'm painted as political that way. It's a lose-lose these days. I mean, you know, I'm just trying to be out here covering the news, and even when I don't try and get political, people say I'm political. And it's just crazy, you know, because like literally Sunday, I was being called, let's see, what was it? Let's see here. Oh yeah, I was being called a liberal, and now today people are calling me a fascist. It's literally just all across the board these days. People don't know what the hell I am, but half of everyone knows they don't like me. So that is what it is, I suppose. But beyond that, I do thank you for the support, Con, and helping this channel to keep on running. But at the same time, I don't want to comment on it because it is a political thing, and if I can stop the voices from complaining for just 5 seconds, maybe it'll mean something. I don't know. But anyways, with that, thank you once again for the support. I hope that I've addressed that well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Neighborhood Bully Exploration, who puts in a $10 donation. And I don't know what y'all are doing exploring the Neighborhood Bully, but it sounds a little bit interesting. But thank you for that $10 support. They said, order some Donald McRonald to eat.
Hey, and thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And we will try and get something to eat. I think I'm probably going to go and get a burger after the stream's over because I'm dying. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. I mean, really, you know. But beyond that, I do have to thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And we will try and get it. And also, now we got someone in the chat saying both sidism is political. Well, what is not political at that point? Huh? Like where does it end? Like, you know, like I try, like you see here, like you see the person who said that. I know you got a certain political opinion. If I'm the opposite of that, you're going to crucify me. And then if I'm the same as you, then it's an echo chamber. So what's the point? Like, and also someone else said it really matters to be political. Why? Like, I just want to ask you all these questions, like the people who are saying this. Why does it matter? Like, am I going to change something by running my mouth like every other YouTuber in this category does at this point about their political opinion? I haven't seen them change the world making their statements that they make. So why in the world would I be changing the world with the statements I'm going to be making? Like, it doesn't mean anything at all, like to make statements. We're here as a news channel. I'm largely trying to cover the news as neutrally as possible. And with us trying to cover it neutrally as possible and then giving analysis, and then on the analysis side of things, we go, well, you know, this is a good move and this isn't a good move, and it doesn't really matter who they are politically. Then people want to come and eat us alive. Because we're stating our analysis or what our opinion would be on whether that's a good move for the United States or not. Like I'll just be honest. Like, I'll be honest with you. I just don't really like political people. I'll be entirely frank, because it's all about just like virtue signaling and running people's mouths all the time endlessly. Like, it's just such an annoying thing to be a part of. And, you know, like, I just don't want to get involved in it, really. Like, I just want to report the news. Like, if someone does something, like if a president does something that I like, then I'll say, you know, I like it. If they don't do something that I like, I'll say I don't like it. It doesn't really matter what political party they're in. And also, I don't really think it matters whether I have a say on it or not, because then I just act like I'm more important than I am. And really, to be entirely honest with y'all, I know my voice means a lot to y'all, but in the big picture of things, my voice means nothing to no one. So if I pick a side, it doesn't really mean much of anything. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Disabled Caps Lock, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Disabled Caps Lock, for the support. They said, save the donkeys. They did nothing but haul munitions and supplies.
They're eating the donkeys. They're eating the cats. Like, some, they say, are eating geese. But beyond that, I do have to say that it is a terrible, terrible thing, a horrendous thing, that those donkeys are being used. I hate to see it. I wish that they wouldn't use donkeys, because those are going to become targets for the Ukrainians because they're carrying vital supplies. So, I also have to say I hate that as well. I don't believe the donkeys should be out there. They did nothing to be there, and yet they're being forced to be there. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, it's time for us to move on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Kristen Christofferson, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Christian, as well, for supporting the channel and helping keep it running. And they said, tell Ukraine that Iowa stands with them. And thanks, Enforcer. Save the donkeys.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, and a big thing to hear that Iowa is behind Ukraine. Iowa is a very interesting place. We've actually passed through for only like 3 minutes. I think it was literally like right through here. Like the, I don't know how to pronounce that, so I'm not going to pronounce it. But we passed right over from Hamilton into this town that I will not attempt to name, and then we drove right back over into this area of misery. It was interesting, actually. It was very interesting, as a matter of fact. And I was like, wow, this is what Iowa looks like. I was like, wow, that's crazy. Like, I drove through it for 3 miles. But beyond that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that has addressed that well. And of course, long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Macdeath, who puts in a 5. And thank you, Macdeath, as well, for the support. They said, if you have time, please talk about the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact signed between the USSR, Russia, and Nazi Germany, August 1939. And thanks.
So the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, to cut it down short, was a alliance pretty much in between the Russian Federation and Nazi Germany to carve up Poland. They were going to both invade Poland, and they were going to declare a largely truce or a peace that was going to be indefinite. Surprise, surprise, it wasn't. Where they would both respect each other and have a decent friendship. A lot of people criticized it because everyone obviously knew that that was a sham, and Hitler had an intention to invade the Soviet Union later on. It was clearly laid out in Mein Kampf, but Stalin apparently was a little stupid, maybe illiterate, and so he didn't know. So, well, he kind of did know, he just didn't care. Then he signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact anyways, and just went along with it. But that's kind of like, in short, for the large part, what the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact is. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. Thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Howard Mendelson, who puts in a $50 donation, a massive amount of support, and thank you very much, Howard, for the $50 support and helping to keep the channel running as well. And Howard says, your news show is being consumed by a politically motivated audience, so you've got a tough needle to thread. And that is true, Howard. It is a tough needle to thread. And when the Enforcer said that a minute ago, I was thinking a lot of people in the audience probably follow politics quite closely. But the thing is, we just don't cover it here on this channel because we don't want to bring that here and then cause fights in the chat. But generally speaking, though, I don't have any problem with people following politics. Like, if you have it one side or another, that's your right. Go right ahead. But me personally, I will say that it does cause fights. Like, when you try to bring people together for one common cause outside of politics, and then you try to mix politics with it, that's when it turns into basically a powder keg and it goes wild. But thank you very much, Howard, for that support. And Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta thank you so much for the support, Howard. And that's true. Matthew tries to say it more diplomatically, but I'll just be honest. Very political people, because I'm not gonna lie to y'all, I'm gonna be frank. Well, not frank, I'm just gonna be honest with y'all. Very, very political people wear me down very quickly, because being political in the modern day in America means that you live outside of reality and you just come up with stuff like, like you can watch, like I kind of brought up a while ago, like they say that there's old people in a certain political party, but it's on both sides, and then if you point that out, you get crapped on because you're not blindly following one side or the other. It just wears me out so much. Like, you can't ever say anymore that, this is a good action that the president made, and this is a bad one. Regardless of whether you like that person or not, you can say it's a good action or not. You can't do that anymore because, everyone's got to say either the guy is just literally Hitler or he's an angel. He's practically Jesus reincarnated. And it just gets so old. It really does, because it pretty much screws me down to having to just be screwed every night. Like I'm damned if I do, damned if I don't. Because if I don't make a comment, then people are pissed off that I didn't make a comment. And then if I make a comment and try and explore all options, then people are pissed off because I was trying to be a little fair. Then if I say that I liked it or didn't like it, then half of everyone's going to be pissed off because I said I didn't like it. It's almost like that at this point. And I just got to say, like, it's getting old. Like, it really is, like, to me. Like, and I just got to be, honest. Like, that's how it is. Like, that's how I view it. That's how it's going. And it's just so old. Like, and also it's so old that people keep on acting like if I say something's going to change everything. It's like doesn't everyone realize that all these little marches around the square and everything, they don't do anything? Like, it's like, what's the point? Like go vote. Like, that's great, and, talk about it here and there, but having your life consumed with it being identified with a political party, it's just so tiresome. Like, it's identity politics at its finest, and it just is all-consuming and really tiresome, like, really. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well. And with that, thank you once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Monstro Lab, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Monstro Lab, for the support. They said, please keep your eyes peeled and also the guns ready. I think a creepybot post hinted at Putin thugs deleting more journalists.
And can you reread that one again?
They said, keep your eyes peeled. I think that Putin is hinting at deleting more journalists.
I actually haven't heard if he's going to be doing that, but if he is going to be doing that, that's nothing new. He does that a lot. Honestly, I'm really surprised that fella, I forgot his name, Surovikin. I'm surprised that he's still alive, actually, because he dissed on Putin a while ago, and somehow he's still around. I mean, that's actually kind of a little shocking, to be entirely honest. But beyond that, I hope that does address that somewhat well. And I thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Uncle Sam's misguided child, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Uncle Sam, for the support. He said, I'm sorry I'm late, and I was messing with ignorance on X, and Slava Ukraine, and long live the LSA, and we are family. And remember that, humans, we all make mistakes, and the big kahuna up in the sky doesn't.
And I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And perfectly fine. It's better to be late than never. You know what I mean? But beyond that, I thank you so much once again for support. And thank you for the kind words as well and helping this channel to keep on running. And so with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, big shout out to Nelson Johnson, who just threw in a $20 donation and threw in a super sticker and said victory. And it shows the YouTube hippopotamus jumping around and doing the peace sign. So thank you very much, Nelson, for the 20 and helping to keep us running as well on the coffee brewing. And also to the Advil Fund. And the Advil Fund apparently didn't work that well today. It didn't do a damn thing for me. But thank you, Nelson, for the support. And Enforcer, what say you?
I got to thank you so much for the support, Nelson Johnson, and helping this channel to keep on running. It is folks like you who help to make this thing possible and keep it rolling. I got to thank you so much, massively, once again, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing rolling. So huge thanks once again, and we're on to the next one.
And our next ones here go to Plazat, who puts in a 3, along with Rose Silver, who put in a 2, and Voodoo U1, who also put in a 2, along with LSA Sergeant Figment, who put in a 2 as well. And huge shout out to all 4 of you, Plazat, Rose, U1, and also LSA Sergeant Figment, for the support and helping to keep the channel running. But Enforcer, what say you?
I got to thank each of you for the support and helping this thing to keep on rolling. Y'all make this thing possible day in and day out, and if it wasn't for the amazing folks of the Lee Spring Army who took it upon themselves to support the channel, even when they didn't have to, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible every day. And so a huge thanks to y'all so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a classic $10 super chat, Australian, from Duncan VR, with the animal noises. And if the Advil didn't clear up the headache, this should. But that's just, thank you very much, Duncan, for the support. I'm just joking, by the way. He said, "Ba moo quack. That fly eats his subs on Tuesdays. Ba woof. He needs a new chair. Oh man, ba ba."
And I thank you so much for the support, Duncan VR, and I thank you for helping this channel to keep on running. And of course, it's the traditional animal noises. It wouldn't be a normal stream without them. And I gotta thank you so much once again for throwing them in. And baba, babumba. And thank you once again, baba, for helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And it wouldn't be a traditional LSA stream. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And we have a $10 super chat once more from Khan LSA, who puts in that 10. Thank you very much, Khan, for the second support of the night. They said at 23 years old, you have a very common ancient Chinese disease. It takes years to cure. The disease is called too young, and you will get through it. We all did. You will get more political as you age. Khan is actually the opposite for me. I don't know about the Enforcer, but it's actually the opposite. I was highly political up until, I would say, about 2 years ago, and then became very unpolitical after I got very frustrated with the whole thing. But no, I was actually highly political. In fact, that was my area of study is political science, and I went from being very involved in it to realizing this is a complete waste of time to get too invested in this, because all of them are out for the same thing, and it's pretty much greed. And they'll stab all of us in the back if it means, you know, getting on top, which is what politicians like to do. They've done that for ages, but it seems like they've gotten worse in recent years. So I would say, honestly, generally, you vote for whoever you think is going to help you the most, but you don't get too attached to them because at the end of the day, they're politicians and they're, of course, a little bit greasy. But Enforcer, what say you?
I thank you for the support, Con. Actually, I have to say that's the same for me. Actually, it's worked in the opposite direction. I used to be incredibly political. I actually used to be one of the kind of people I've talked about tonight, saying, people who doggedly defend something in one camp, but then chastise that same thing in the other. I used to be one of those people, crazily enough, back in high school and a little bit outside of high school. But reality slapped me in the face because I actually tried to run in a local election in my town. And those very people who were supposedly in the same political group as me tried to screw me over because I wasn't in their in-group. And then that opened up my mind. And I went, wow, it doesn't really matter if you actually agree with the same things or not. They're really all out for themselves or their cronies or the people that they like. And they will screw you over in an instant if you stand in their way in any single way, shape, or form. And then that's when I realized, why in the world am I really rooting for any of these people and acting like our entire existence and life depends on them? Because a lot of these people are scum. I mean, that's just really the reality of it. I mean, look at them. Every single one of them's got, very questionable family members. A lot of them get involved in very questionable things in their lives. Some people, they cheat on their wives, or they go bankrupt a whole bunch of times, or a myriad of things. And some of y'all are going to start thinking of certain people in your heads. But no, actually, they're the same people that you back up and support, not the other people. Your people do the same. And it's just really crazy to me that people back these folks up and support them. Like for example, when people say, oh, we want to support real good values. It's like, well, that guy has 5 wives, had 5 of them. It's like, is that really traditional or not? Just looking at that for what it is. Or on the other side, oh, we want to support upstanding people. It's like, well, that guy's a felon, or close to being a felon. This guy's got loads of misdemeanors. And not only that, he's got shady relations with foreign countries. It's like, is that guy really a good guy or no? And once you look at that, it's like, well, none of them really are, great people. And honestly, a lot of them just end up being scum these days. There was that one that was fondling this dude in a theater in Colorado. You know who I'm talking about, Matthew. On camera. They were caught on camera doing it. And it's like, and they're just most of them are horrendous people. I mean, all of them are for the most part if you just look at them. And it's like that's just a crazy, it's like a crazy thing to me to try and actively back up those people and support them, because I'd be honest with you, yeah, they're probably nice to talk to in a conversation here and there. I wouldn't want to be friends with any of them at all. I wouldn't want to be friends really with the current president, the last president, the one before both of them. I wouldn't want to be friends with any of them, because when you look at them, it's like I know people like that. I know people like the last president, like this one. I met people like that in real life. And I'll be honest with you, they are so repulsive to be around in private for an incredibly long duration of time. You'll get tired of it and you'll want to get away from these people. Unless you're just sucking up to them and you're looking to get some sort of a benefit out of it yourself, there's no reason to be around them. And that's why I just, it wears me out when people are like, oh, come on, it's so important to have a voice and a say. It's like, no, it doesn't really matter. It's like, what am I going to do? Back up I'm going to back up scumbag A or scumbag B. What's the choices here? It's and when you actually look at it, you take a step back, think about it. Really think about it. The same domestic political topics that y'all are all really political people, y'all are all focused on right now are the same ones that have been going on for 15 to 20 years. And nothing has been done in any direction. It's a distraction. Most of domestic politics is a complete distraction. When you look at it, it's like I could bring up one of them, and I will promise y'all, complete distraction, gun control. Look at that. Nothing has changed in that towards one direction or the other for 20 years. Nothing at all. It has hardly changed one bit. And if anything changes, it's minuscule. It doesn't move towards one direction or the other. And that's how every domestic political topic is. It's just a distraction. And people get all caught up on these things. And most of these things, even if they did change, have a minimal impact on the public. I mean, most things that are talked about only affect tens of thousands of people or less out of a country of 360 million people. And most of those things are just incredibly small. I mean, it's like minuscule to the point that it doesn't even really, it's not even a drop in a bucket in what happens in this country every day. And yet somehow people are spurned up to just act like these are the only topics that matter, instead of topics like, where are we going to make our money? Where's a good job? You know, can they bring us a good job? Like we actually moved on, like the public did, from the really tough, hard hitting political topics that I actually think really matter, like having a good, decent standard of living. We completely moved on from that into vapid reality TV kinds of policies that really don't impact anyone, no matter which direction they head in, for the public good or for the public worse. Like that would really be my take on it. And that's
And also, like I saw Jacob Clark saying the live chat, said, and the thing is, when you're in politics, there's a spotlight cast on your life, and every bad thing you've done will be pointed out, and none of us are without sin. That is true, Jacob. Like, nobody's perfect, and some people have made big blunders, some people have made small blunders. At the end of the day, though, everybody's a human, so people are going to make mistakes. It just depends on what type of mistake is being made, basically, and whether or not people will support the person. But it is true, like, politics is extremely nasty these days. If someone that's decent wants to run for politics and they've done something in their life that is out there, is able to be found, somebody will find it and they'll drag it up and put it on commercials, which is really, honestly, a really nasty part of it, because, you know, people don't deserve to have their past necessarily brought up and smeared in everybody's faces just because somebody's trying to win a political seat. But that's the way it works now. And I think that's the reason why a lot of people really don't want to touch politics, is because they're worried about that. They're like, if I go into politics, they're going to drag up every stupid thing I've ever done in my life and try to smear me with it. And of course, like you said, people aren't perfect, so it's going to probably ruin that person's life, which wouldn't be right either. And most people won't touch politics for that reason. So it's just, the whole thing's nasty. It's just a dog eat dog world.
Also, someone said, Chaz Martin said, I got to disagree. So, there's this thing that happened in my state that I don't like, but that's your state government. Like, on the state level, things actually do change. But on the federal level, which is what everyone really actually cares about, like when you think about it, can you name your state representative? Like, most people, maybe you can, you're in the outlier, but most people can't. Like, I'll be entirely honest with you, I really do not know who my state legislative representative is. Like, I know the governor and the lieutenant governor.
I could tell you, but I don't want to say their names. They're super political now.
But nevertheless, I can't actually tell you who are. And also, Matthew, wait a minute, are you talking about federal representative in Congress or our state legislator?
I was talking about the rep, our rep for the Fed.
Well, yeah, I mean, everyone knows those. Like, but no one knows who our state legislator is. You know, like, it has no clue. We have no clue. Like, can you name that person? Do you know who they are?
Not off the top of my head, not for the state legislature.
Exactly.
No.
Like, I don't either. Like, and that's actually where the magic happens, to be entirely honest with y'all, is in the states. Like you're saying there, like with what you're saying. Now you cannot buy a 30-round magazine in your state. We can in ours, in Alabama. All the magic happens there, like in the state governments. And yet, people continue to focus on the federal level where not a damn thing changes. And it doesn't change for reason. It's because no one actually wants to change it, because they got to have something to come around for on the next election cycle to claim that they're going to change. So they create a gridlock. They sit there on this meaningless topic, and they just continue to go back and forth saying that it should be this way or that way, and nothing ever really changes on the federal level. Meanwhile, things could change wildly on the state level in between, and nobody even cares, and nobody even knows who their state legislators are, or anything for that matter at all on the state level. And it's just the crazy. That's why I can't get into politics, because it's just so backwards. Like, people ought to be focusing. Like if I said, like, if the whole United States thought the way I thought was proper, to think on politics, people will work from the bottom up. Local level is one of the most important. State level is the most important. And federal level may as well just be something going on in the periphery. That's more of like an international concern sort of a deal, and nothing ever really is expected to change there. So that's kind of like the last priority for most people. That's how it should work. Instead, it's the complete opposite. Everyone cares about the federal government only. Hardly anyone cares about the state level. And the local level, no one even gives a damn. I mean, anyone could get elected in the local level. You know, you could have the homeless people run for the dog catcher, and they probably get voted in because they're the first one in line in alphabetical order on the ballot. Like, that's how it works. And it's just a crazy system. And then on top of that, everyone wants to scream at the top of their lungs and be as violent and cruel and mean and nasty each other as possible on both sides. for no reason at all, like it's actually helping anything, and nothing still happens. Like, whether people were civil about it or just absolutely brutes about it, nothing is going to change. Like it's like, I don't know if anyone's realized this, but like I brought it up just on the one topic with gun control, nothing has changed in either direction, towards the better or worse for either side. But people will still get, like, feral at each other. You know, the people who like guns are going to scream at the people who don't like them, and the people who don't like them are going to scream at the people who like guns. And nothing ever changes, and they're all just violent and angry over something that they really have no say in or really will change. And that's kind of why I just don't like getting into politics, or really even bringing it on to the stream at all, or really getting into it in the future, is because I kind of realized it was like that years ago, and I was like, this is just freaking terrible. Like honestly, like living in a really political kind of a mindset, you just live in misery, you know, like you really do, because you're always hearing how you're just getting screwed over by the other side, and how your life's going to be hell, and they're eventually going to come and put you into a camp because you think differently than them, because that's what everyone says these days. And I would know because I was in it. Like I was actually really into it for a while, and the side I was into, they would say, oh, you know, the other party, they're going to set up a dictatorship, they're going to come and put you in camps, and then the other side says the exact same thing, like at different times, and it's just bizarre. Like, but honestly, that's why I'm like not really into politics. I used to be, actually, kind of like grew out of it. Maybe I'll get into politics again, like really again in the future, and actually be invested in it. But I kind of doubt it after having my own personal experiences with it. I just wasn't a fan of either side. One more thing. Some people are saying, are you still going to try and run for president in 2040? I'd hope so, but honest truth is, folks, I'm not going to get elected. You know why? It's going to be the show. Like, the people are going to come back to the show and go over it with a fine-tooth comb. They're going to find jokes I made about the Russians, and they're going to go, oh my God, you know, he hates Russians or something. Or they're going to say something like this talk right now. They'll come back and find it and go, oh, well, he's a turncoat. He's not even in this political party. He hates all political parties. Although that statement was made 20 years ago and probably has no meaning or weight on what's happening right now. There will be 5,000 people who come out with false allegations. That happens on everyone these days. There will just be all kinds of horrendous things. And
I was thinking that too. I was thinking that too. I was like, throughout all these like 1,091 days, there's got to be so much stuff that people could like bring up that either one of us have said throughout the years we've been doing this. They could be like, this person's not fit for office. Honestly, like it might be in the bag just based on what we saw on the show at some point or another.
Yeah, you know, it's going to be something. You know, like I can think of all kinds of things. And then, you know, they're going to bring out the hot dog man. I know it. Like he'll be an old shit, probably under a bridge at that point. But he'll be going, "Oh man, he's a real grifter," or something like that. They'll have him out there. It'll just be stupidity, like to the max. So you know, it might as well be a wash. I'll be entirely honest with you all. I would hope to be president one day. I know I'd have a lot of good things I'd want to do, but it won't amount to hill of beans, probably in the end. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well. And also, Calentino said, bro, have you seen who is being elected right now? Oh yeah, I have. But I'm different, you see. Like to explain the kind of people who get elected right now, the kind of people who get elected right now to me are, and this is of course a subjective thing, so you're completely fine to disagree, morally questionable people, like just in their like day-to-day doings, things that I would never consider doing, they do, and without question. I'm not really that kind of a person. I'm an outlier, see? Like when I get into the whole deal, people are going to be saying, well, you know, he's obviously not experienced. He didn't go bar hopping or bar crawling, you know, and he doesn't really drink. And also he never really had that much of a social life because he just stayed at home and worked all the time, you know, like we do right now. And all those things are going to be held against us, because one thing I know is that people who do go out and drink do not give the time of day to people who don't. Like, I know that because I've dealt with people who go out and drink and they'll just act like you're an idiot if you don't. They're gonna be like, you drink Smirnoff? I'll be like, nah, I'm good, I know, whatever. And then they just act like you're dead. Like they legitimately do. That was our experience at law school. Like I got asked to go to a party, you know, and do that bar crawling crap one time, and I was like, I'm sorry, I got work, and then I was treated like I was dead for the rest of the semester. So, you know, that'll be another thing, you know, like the political party people would go, oh, that's someone I can relate to, that guy, I can't really relate to him, and then I'll be tossed aside for the large part, just smeared by them. So, with that, I hope that kind of addresses that. It kind of touches on it a little bit. I feel like that was probably the best explanations I could give. And let's see. Just saying the jokes you make probably won't be a disqualifier. Yeah, you know, no, like I promise you this, anything can be made into a disqualifier. Like let me tell you something. Let me tell you something, Calentino. The smear campaigns do not care. They will take it out of context. Like if I made a smear campaign on you right now because you're on an opposite political side, I go, Calentino obviously doesn't care about the well-being of humanity because they said just saying the jokes you make probably won't be the disqualifier about Russians. And then they'll make it sound terrible on a commercial, and people, you know, because people don't research anything or do any effort, they'll go, oh my God, Calentino's a terrible person. And then their opinion is permanently changed from you because they heard something out of context that was deliberately presented to them out of context, but the public is a cruel jury. Like, I've seen it in action, and the public can be cruel, like incredibly cruel. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well. But I hope you see what I'm saying there, because it doesn't matter if you know, you were perfect and shiny. They would go, he's shiny, too shiny, he's done something, you know, and then it would be that. And then people would go, huh, they're right, he doesn't have any dirt on him, he must have done something really bad. But anyways, I hope that does address that well. Thank you so much for giving your support, Con, and helping this channel to keep on running. But I hope that kind of touched all the bases on why I'm not really a political person these days. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Brian Justin, who puts in a $20 donation, and thank you very much, Brian, as well, for that support. And Brian said, why aren't the wounded Russians surrendering to Ukraine? It seems odd to me they don't. And what say you?
And I got to thank you for the support. And also, Matthew, can you reread that one again?
Brian said, why aren't the wounded Russians surrendering to Ukraine? It seems odd to me that they don't. And what say you?
I think they're generally put into slightly off the front defensive positions, so they really don't have the option to really walk far enough to get to the Ukrainian line to surrender. I think that's largely the reason why. Or they're scared that they're crippled and they won't really be able to move fast enough, and then they'll probably just get shot for desertion if they attempt it. So those are probably the two best explanations as to why they're probably not, or they still believe in the Russian cause, and they're just going to go along with it. One of those three. But still, thank you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a $10 super chat from Kevin. And thank you very much, Kevin, for the support as well. And he said, when I was a kid, I used to swallow the goldfish crackers, thinking they'd swim around in my stomach harmlessly. I still do today. And the question, how did you and Enforcer Matt meet? Well, you see, here's what happened. About 24 years ago, or 24 score, 7 years ago, whatever, I was born, and that's when I met the Enforcer, because that's my brother. But anyways, Enforcer, what say you?
We're brothers. That's how we met. Matthew's 18 months older than me. But let's see here. To answer that question, I'm sorry, Matthew, I can hardly think. I'm still out of it for the large part. Can you reread that one again?
Yes. Let's see here. They said, when I was a kid, I used to swallow the goldfish crackers thinking they would swim around my stomach harmlessly. I still do today.
Actually, I used to think that too, actually, funnily enough. I used to think that the goldfish were like these living kind of like a little fish thing. And I loved them because they were bland and kind of like salty. So I was like, hey, these things are great. Like, I was like, you just eat these by the bucket load and really have no issues. But still, thank you so much for the support and helping this channel keep on running. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And also, let's see here. I saw something in the chat. Let's see. Oh yeah, I saw someone say, hold up. Let me find it. It was actually good. It was a pretty good one. Oh dang, man. Like hang on, where in the world did they go? Let's see. I was where in the world? Dude, I saw it and I was like, that's a good point. I'm gonna have to go back and get it. And now I can't find it, so I guess we're going to have to just move on to the next one.
All right, so moving on to our next one here. This one goes to Mark-Andre Burnett, who puts in 2 super chats, and they're each a $2 donation. And thank you both to you, Mark. Sorry about that, Mark. My brain's not working. The migraine's killing me. But Mark put in that 4 and said, almost 3 years with you, and it's so cool. And we are living in a historic moment today.
And we really are living in very historic times these days. These are times that people are going to be looking back on with great interest in the future. And honestly, it's kind of an honor to be in these times. But now a lot of people get to see the dirty work of living in a time like this. It's not all glory and sunshine like they make it out to be in the history books. But, you know, it still is a time to be in for sure, and one that people will remember from here to the end of time. But still, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to another channel legend. It is the return of Trister1, and he puts in a $20 donation. And huge shout out to Trister, and it's good to see you once again, and I hope you're doing good. And he said, what's the probability of a frozen front?
Highly likely, in my opinion. If you're talking about on like the strategic level, it's pretty much already happened. As far as a frozen front in peace negotiations, that may also be likely at this point, because it doesn't really look like anyone's standing up except for Ukraine on trying to retake territory. So that might actually happen. Maybe. I don't really think that's a good move, but that might be a decent possibility at this point. But I hope that does address that well, Trister1, and thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and with that, that is actually our last super chat that we have to cover. So we are now moving on to our live chat questions and our Morse code decoders of the stream. And tonight we had the entire roster. We had Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Kevin J, Paul Schultz, David Millsaps, Royal Fluffiness, Air Bill Garbo, Joni Dog, and Norm Pritchett. And they said, today's Morse code decipher says, you're cooking in a burnt pan, the oil's burning, leave it, LLT, LOC.
And
what the hell does that mean?
That was about the Samara oil refinery burning.
Also, that's what the Morse code decoders asked. What the hell does that mean? That's what they asked.
That's the sound of money, and y'all got it down on the nail and got the explanation all in one go. Y'all got it absolutely correct. And I got to congratulate y'all for getting that Morse code message correct, because you're cooking in a bad pan, you... I can't even say the rest of it because I'm going to screw up and actually say the words, but beyond that, I got to thank y'all so much for getting that correct. Actually, amazing right there. I think y'all got that down on the nail. Really impressive stuff. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and we just got two more super chats to cover here, and the first one goes to Verna Weeks, who puts in a very generous 7 Canadian. And thank you very much, Verna, for that support, and also that voice crack right there. Excuse me. But thank you, Verna, for the support. And Enforcer, what say you?
I thank you so much for the support, Verna Weeks, and helping this channel to keep on running. You didn't throw in a comment, but the support means a lot and helps this thing to be possible. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Disabled Caps Lock once again, who puts in the 5 as well, and says, love you, LSA Army, and keep that migraine under control. And I'll tell you what, Disabled Caps Lock, I'm trying to keep that migraine under control. I'll be honest with you, though, it's got the full whammy effect on me. It's got the terrible head pain. It's in fact, nausea with it and everything. It's one of those really bad migraines. But thank you very much for the support. And Enforcer, what say you?
I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And hopefully we'll be able to get that migraine under control eventually, I would suppose. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Also, I wanted to address something else. I saw someone say something about the whole political thing earlier, and it finally hit me what it was. Someone said, oh, the Enforcer, you know, he's a both sider. He feels like he's higher and mightier than thou. Oh, hell no. No, I don't feel higher and mightier than that. I just don't like getting involved in it. It's nasty business for no reason, at least on, the conversational level, which is what we would be doing. In politics, it's nasty, and it's nasty with reason, in between the politicians. That makes sense, and I can get that. But with people talking about it out in the public, people act like if they don't win the argument, they're going to die. They argue like their life is on the line. And I'm not into that. It's just stupid. It really is. I'm not better than those folks, but I got more time and energy to spend than just yapping the yap and then acting like my life depends on winning this pointless argument. Because guess what? Once you get done arguing with that person's going off to the bakery, and I'm going off to a fast food restaurant to go shove a greasy burger down my throat, and nothing changed. It didn't matter if I won or lost, or if I was civil or yelled at them, made no difference. So what's the point? What's the point in engaging in that kind of stuff? And especially here on the internet. Do y'all know how sick people are on the internet sometimes? Just doing what we've done, and a lot of y'all love it. We get death threats. People are doxing our home address and stuff. Back when we lived at our old house, no one's found the new one yet. like people are wanting to say that they're going to send you stuff in the mail, that are going to show up and strangle you or kill you or something. Like, I don't want to, like it's already enough as it is, just talking about what we talk about and making it as calm as we possibly can. Imagine all the crazy lunatics that would be threatening to kill us and make our lives a living hell every day we're alive because we said our opinion on the internet. Which, to be entirely honest, I really don't even have an opinion on most of that stuff because I find it to be nonsensical topics. But, that's another reason why. It's just, it's a barbarous place. It's a barbarous place. It's truly horrendous. But, nevertheless, I hope that does address that somewhat well. And, let's see. Oh, look, that's called resignation. It's what happens when you're oppressed. Look, everyone oppresses us, man. Like, I can make one comment on one side, I can make something neutral, or I can make something on the other side, and we're gonna get hammered by people regardless, like, at this point. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to get on into the live chat. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so getting back to our live chat questions once again. Also, I see Trister1, who is a doctor, by the way. He said Tylenol, Gatorade, and sleep. I'll be honest with you, Trister. The sleep thing finally got the beds back, the actual beds, not the air beds this time. And now I think we'll be able to catch up on sleep because I think the air mattress was robbing us of sleep, and I think that's a part of it. But I'm hopped up on Tylenol like crazy. Like I couldn't take any more Tylenol, or I could end up in a bad foul shape from that. So it's not helping. The Tylenol is not doing me any good. Sadly, I don't have any Gatorade though, so I can't take that. Or drink that, not take it. It's not like a drug or something like that. But if I had some Gatorade, I would. Maybe some orange juice might suffice instead. But anyways, with that, we're moving back to our live chat questions. And this one is going to go to Robin, who said, what is going on the north of Kharkiv?
And what's going on in northern Kharkiv? The Russians are attempting to push towards Kupiansk. The Ukrainians are largely holding them back and stopping that at this point. That's pretty much what's going on right now. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Judy, who says, what is going on with North Korea?
Well, we heard that they're dedicated to continuing their support to Russia, and also they condemned a joint agreement by South Korea, Japan, and the United States, stating that they wanted North Korea to denuclearize. And the North Koreans condemned that and stated that they never denuclearize. So that's what's going on with North Korea right now. And so I hope that does address that well. We are on to the next one.
All right, and our next question here goes to Raven, who says, what's your guys' opinion of the U.S. and Russia reestablishing banking transactions?
I personally don't think that's a great idea because that might allow them to be able to borrow money from U.S. investors, which will be able to finance them and keep the war going. Not a necessarily great idea, but someone's about to bash the shit out of me for saying that, so we'll just keep that at that. So anyways, I hope that does address that somewhat well, and we are on to the next one.
Well, if you can't get bashed much worse than someone saying that Zelensky only has a 4% approval rating, which is just bollocks out the ass, to say the least. But anyways, moving on here to this next one. This one goes to Jenkins USA, who says, what's the holdup on releasing the $300 billion frozen funds to Ukraine? Is it the German elections?
I don't think it's the German elections. I think what's holding it up is that the Bundestag hasn't voted on it yet, and that's just largely what's holding it up at this point. I do believe, might be wrong though, but that's what I'm largely believing and understanding at this point. But I hope that does address that somewhat well, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Caviar, who says, how many Bayraktar drones does Turkey have?
They have quite a lot. I believe they have a couple of hundred, if I'm correct, but I wouldn't know the exact number off the top of my head, and I don't believe that number is publicly stated currently, so I'd have to declare some ignorance on that. So with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to AF Kaplan, who says, in light of the recent events in Saudi Arabia, how concerned are you that aid to Ukraine from the U.S. might be slowed, reduced, or halted?
I'm not really that concerned, especially with what Lavrov was saying today. I think support's going to continue as normal at this point, because not doing so, especially with the terms that the Russians laid out today, that will look weak. Like I don't care what people think politically. If the president of the United States bowed down to the Russians to the point he was kissing their feet and gave them everything that they wanted, that would look weak. Like, I don't think anyone could have any respect left for someone like that. Like, who the hell could do that? The Russians are a ninth-rate power at best, economically insignificant, and militarily dying. It would be stupid to bend over backwards for a country like that. It may as well be an insignificant backwater yokel land compared to most other countries that we have relations with. So why in the world would we bend over backwards to appease people like that? The only reason that we could is because we're scared of their nuclear weapons. the ones that might work, and that what makes us look like we're cowards. Like who the hell is the United States with a $30 trillion economy, and also not only that, a $1 trillion military budget annually, which beats out the Russians by 5 times, even with the war spending that the Russians have going on right now, and that's the best Russia can do. Who the hell are we to sit there and act like the Russians are scary? Like, that would be ludicrous. Like, that legitimately would be ludicrous to the point no one would ever respect the United States for years after that, because we would look the weakest of the weak. I mean, we had what happened in Afghanistan happen, which, already wasn't that great of a look with how quickly the Afghan government that we created collapsed. Then we had what's happened inside of the Middle East, where the United States has largely been indecisive and didn't really take a lot of action on that. Then we had that ridiculous hostage arrangement, which happened only a few weeks ago. And now, to top it all off, we're going to bend over backwards to the Russians. Everything that we've done for the past 5 years at that point looks like the United States is just a pushover. And so who's to say that China wouldn't want to go on Taiwan at that point, because it's not like the Americans are going to be there. Who's to say that the North Koreans don't start aggressing against South Korea because they know America's not going to be there? It would be terrible if that was the case. I honestly have to think that cannot be the case, because anyone with a brain would see that. Like, I could see that, and I'm not exactly a diplomatic expert, but that's what makes sense. So that would be crazy if we just went and bent over backwards to Russia, which is completely insignificant in practically every way. So with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and this one goes to W13RD guy, who says, will China send a peacekeeping force to Ukraine as part of a negotiated ceasefire?
No, we have not heard anything about the Chinese being involved in any way. So with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Caviar once again, who says, can we please hold a vote referendum in the chat on which oblast the LSA will take from Russia?
Oh, man. That'd be interesting. There's so many of them, though. I'm not really sure we could run a poll on that sort of a thing. But that is still an interesting idea. I admire your goal for asking for such a poll, but that's very ambitious. I think they have like 80 oblasts or something like that. It's a fairly large number. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Barry Woodward, who said, what is Turkey's motivation to move into talks with Ukraine?
Really the whole Turkish mini-sphere thing that I went into in stream earlier in great detail, but basically they're wanting to create their own little miniature economic sphere, pretty much recreating the Ottoman Empire in economic form, and Ukraine's a part of it. So that's why they have a heavily invested interest in trying to get a peace for Ukraine. So with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to David Tablet, who said, under international law, are the Ukrainians under any obligation to abide by the terms of a treaty that they had no part in negotiating or signing?
Technically, no. They could just do whatever they want. That's not binding to them, because that treaty was made in between the Russian Federation and the United States. Ukraine, actually, at that point, would have never signed a peace treaty with the Russian Federation, and Russia would have never signed a peace treaty with Ukraine. So technically, the war would still be going on for both of those parties, and the United States did nothing more than make itself look like it did something, but in reality, it did nothing. So with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well. I hope that does. And also, Errol Flynn, oh hell no, I'm not touching the political thing. We're trying to avoid it as best we can. People keep on trying to drag something out of us, like either to be happy with it or unhappy with it, and I'm just not doing that. Like, I've made some of my opinions somewhat clear on what I think are not good actions and what are good actions, and people still wanted to get us for that. Like the Panama thing, for example. That's one of the few things I think at this point I could say, yeah, I could actually see an argument behind that, and then people wanted to come and chop my head off for that one. And then when I say, Greenland, that doesn't really make too much sense. Just, invest in more in their security. And then people want to get me for that. And then when I go into the whole Ukraine, Russia, America thing, and then I say, this is a good idea and this isn't, then people want to, get me for that. Someone, and when I say someone's not happy out there, it seems like a third of the chat is unhappy at this point, no matter what answer is given. And if we just refuse to stay out of politics, then we have, tons of people nagging us to get us into politics. And then when we give them an answer, then half of those people will be pissed, and then half of them will be really happy with it. So, it is what it is at this point, but I'm not touching it. I just rather get bashed for being non-political, because at least then everyone's equally unhappy, and we're not being, political and breaking the rule that this channel has kept dear for 3 years. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and this one goes to Stephen Russell, who says, what do you guys think about the USA siding with Russia and encouraging Russian aggression with appeasement while selling Ukraine down the river?
I don't really think that's happening just yet. I mean, plenty of stupid statements have been made, but there's no peace treaty that they've made yet. So I largely say that that hasn't really happened yet, and also I'm not going to make a comment on that. We support American Western interests. Ukraine's within Western interests, and that's largely what it is. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Old Warrior, who says, any idea how to find out what the black market fuel prices are in Russia?
Sadly, I don't think we can find that out because I don't really have any information on that readily available. But with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Sub the Gator, who says, what are the chances that there is a rare earth minerals deal in talks between Russia and the United States if we back off from supporting Ukraine?
I don't think the rare minerals deal is going to be going through because there was like a little scam con man kind of a thing tried a while ago where the Secretary of the Treasury showed up and tried to get Zelensky to sign it without really reading it. And then Zelensky read it and sent it off to some Ukrainian attorneys. And then they said that it was a messed up deal because they weren't even getting military support. They were just handing over half of everything in the rare minerals department for nothing, or the rare metals department for nothing. So they didn't agree to it. I don't really know how that's going to work from here because I feel like the Ukrainians are not going to be trusting any deal that's presented at this point because of how that went. Like that's not even trying to get political. It was literally like a used car salesman tactic of, don't read this, just sign here so we can get to talking. This needs to be done kind of fast. Like, you don't really do treaties like that. Like, I don't know who that. There's no way around that. So anyways, with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well, but I don't think there's going to be any rare metals agreement in the future with how that went. Also, I'm seeing people still joking about the Gulf of America thing. You know something, folks? I had a thought about it. I thought about it, and now I know what the problem is with it. Like, I'll explain it a little bit more in detail because now I've finally been able to articulate it. I'm not really against a name change for the Gulf of Mexico, but the Gulf of America is lame. Like, it's just lame. Like, think about it. Whenever gulfs are named, they're usually not named after what a country is. And I know a lot of people are like, well, this is the Gulf of America, but America stands for the United States of America. And that's just kind of goofy. You know what I mean? Like, look at this. Like, you don't see this being called the Venezuelan Sea. It's called the Caribbean Sea. It has a name behind it and a history with it. Kind of like how Houston isn't called Super America City. It's called Houston after Sam Houston, who was one of the, was the first president of the Republic of Texas. The Gulf of California is named after this land that used to be under New Spain's control, which was California. Like, I think it would have been a lot cooler if it was renamed, like for some reason, if it had to be renamed, if it was renamed to something like the Gulf of Houston or the Gulf of, say, DeSoto, because DeSoto did travel along a large length of this area through the south of it. Something like that, like that would have been interesting and would have really called to some sort of a local history sort of a deal, kind of like the Gulf of Mexico already did. But calling it the Gulf of America, it just feels like such a corporate rebranding. To be honest, it comes off as ignorant. Like you could call it so many things, and it's just that. Like it's not even really cool. It's just kind of lame. It feels like that's almost like Amazon Prime Golf now. Like with how it was named. You could have just come up with so many other cooler options than that. That would have called back on different parts of American history or something like that. But that's what it is. So I hope that I hope that words my problem with it a little bit better. Because also another thing is that there's so many different things that have been in this area. There was the Spanish, the French, the British, and the United States in that order. And you could have picked from any one of those four to rename it if you wanted to. And then we just picked that. And that was lame. Like that's just lame. Like we could have called it, let's see here. We could have called it the Gulf of Jackson, or the Jackson Gulf, after Andrew Jackson, one of our presidents who fought at the Battle of New Orleans, which is near to the Gulf of Mexico. That would have been kind of a little, that would have been a neat one, calling back on some part of American history, call back to, I don't know, an American legend or something like that. something, the Gulf of America is just overly corporate sounding. It's like, what are we going to go around doing now? It's like, we're going to start calling everything, Super America Land, Bald Eagle, that kind of a deal. It's like, come on, let's come up with something a little bit more creative that calls back on American history a little bit better. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and believe it or not, this looks like it could be our last question of the night. So, Enforcer, would you like to do the thing?
Man, and we are on to the final question of the night. So, who is the lucky last person who put in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Just Sackett, who said, I believe by the U.S. trying to negotiate any peace negotiations without either Ukrainian or European input will be viewed as both flawed and questionable at best. And what do you think?
I would say that that negotiations between the United States and Russia, I largely believe at this point, aren't really going to be going anywhere. The Russians are making it very clear that they're not looking on trying to compromise or make concessions on any terms. They're putting out unreasonable, insane terms. So I think that the Ukrainians are pretty much going to be continuing the war on regardless at this point, because the U.S. and Russia will not find common ground on anything. So with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well. And with that, Matthew, I understand that we have a final super chat actually before we round this thing out.
And yes, this one goes to Ryan H, who puts in a $5 donation, and thank you, Ryan, as well for the support. He said, hello, Enforcers, and how long do y'all think Ukraine would last militarily if the U.S. did stop supplying weapons, and would Europe be able to fill the gap?
I think Europe can start to fill the gap, to be entirely honest. They're rapidly militarizing at this point and also raising their military spending. So I think they may actually be able to fill the gap. But without U.S. support and with European support continuing at its rate right now, I think the Ukrainians could last about as long as the Russians are going to last. So it would come down to the wire as to who would actually start to win that war by the end, because I think both of them at that point would have a fair chance of surviving out to 2 years at the best, or just a little over a year at the worst case scenario. So with that, I hope that does address that well. We've actually reached the end of tonight's stream. I got to thank each and every one of y'all so much once again for watching. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure to be able to cover all this news with all of y'all tonight. We're entirely grateful and appreciative for all of y'all being here, and if you have enjoyed, please make sure to subscribe and make sure to like and comment as well, because we love to have folks around and we love to get to chit chat with all of y'all about the giant goings-ons and news of every day. And so with that, a big thanks to all of y'all once again for watching. I will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news of the war. Oh, well, not the news of the war in Ukraine, but really news from all around the world, really. But nevertheless, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukrainian. Long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
And with that, folks, thank you all for another great stream tonight. And also apologies for the demure demeanor tonight. Unfortunately, the headache did take me down quite a notch, and hopefully it'll be gone by tomorrow morning. This one's a doozy, so hopefully it will be gone. But thank you all to the 56,000 people that joined us tonight. And of course, we'll see you tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Eastern for the next War News stream, and also maybe midday as well if there's enough news to cover. But with that, of course, Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava, get some rest, and good night.